Ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for the Chair and Vice Chair of Council and its Deputy Chief Executive.
Bore da chi. Dach chi unig gyda gweddi.
We'll begin with a prayer. O Lord, we ask you to assist everyone who guides the life of this nation, in particular members of this council, so that they may, in word and deed, promote justice, truth and peace, to fulfill your will in all matters, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Pa wish the Lord, please. Iawn, fi'n derbyn bod chi'n...
Okay, the cameras disappearing. Councillors have been summoned to attend today's meeting of Carmarthenshire County Council on Wednesday, the 19th of February 2014, for the purposes set out in the summons. I need to go through a few housekeeping arrangements before we move on to the agenda. Fire alarm. There is no planned fire evacuation today. However, if the alarm should sound, it will not be a test. Members of the public in the gallery should remain where you are. A fire warden will immediately attend to you and lead you to a place of safety. Members and officers should vacate the chamber in a calm and orderly fashion via the appropriate exit and assemble below the castle walls facing the quay of the River Towey. Webcasting of meetings. Before proceeding today, I had to remind everyone that the proceedings of today's meeting are being filmed for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's internet site and in the archive record of the meeting. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the Council.
Explain that generally the public seating areas are not filmed. However, by entering the meeting room and using the public seating area, members of the public are consenting to being filmed and to those images appearing on the Council's internet site and in the archive record of the meeting, and may also be used for training purposes within the Council. I should also remind all present that the Chair has the discretion to terminate or suspend filming if, in his opinion, continuing to do so would prejudice the proceedings or the continued filming might infringe the rights of any individual.
Thank you. Microphone and translation units. All members should have already checked whether their headphones are working before the meeting commenced. If you have difficulties during the meeting, then please draw them to the attention of the committee officer in attendance, who will assist you. I must remind all members and officers that you should only activate your microphone after I have invited you to speak on an item. This will allow the proceedings to be seamlessly broadcast. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Linda Evans, Councillor Jeff Thomas, Councillor Winston Lemon, Councillor Irene Williams, Councillor Kerry Thomas and Councillor Tom Davis.
Right, we'll add Councillor Bill Thomas. Thank you.
Declarations of personal interests.
About parts I did order on that, sir.
With all due respect, I haven't come to there yet. I need to read a paragraph before we actually come to that. Declarations of personal interests. We all have a responsibility under the Code of Conduct to verbally declare any personal interests that we may have in relation to any item appearing on the agenda today. Please ensure that you clearly indicate in which agenda item you have a personal interest and the specific nature of the interest to be disclosed. You will also need to repeat your declaration of personal interest at the commencement of the relevant agenda item and indicate whether or not you will be withdrawing from the meeting during consideration of that item. Similarly, you will also need to indicate whether you have been granted a dispensation by the Standards Committee or the Monitoring Officer to speak or vote or both in respect of any item on the agenda. Will members now please make their declarations? Councillor Thomas.
Sorry I jumped the gun, Chair, but I want to declare that I am a blue badge holder and I will not be taking part in any discussions or voting on it at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Similar to Councillor Thomas, I'm a blue badge holder. I believe it's on page 28, and I'd like to declare my interest.
Tim Thomas.
Good morning, Chair. I'm a blue badge holder as well, so I just want to declare it. Thank you.
Badge,
Declare that my daughter works for social services and as daycare and home care, and I will be leaving the chamber if the daycare issue is raised. Thank you.
Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. Blue badge holder, the same item 28, I think it is.
Cody Thomas. Yeah, yeah. Okay, sorry.
Same item, Chair. Blue badge.
Councillor Williams.
The same item, page 28, blue badge.
Right. Oh. Yn gros yn y dachnod, mae hwn yn mynd y bach yn...
Thank you, Chair. I also wish to declare an interest. I'm Governor of Ysgol Maes y Gwendraeth. I have a relative working for the County Council and I also own a blue badge.
Conor Hugh Shepperson.
Thank you, Chair. Item 4.1, the revenue budget. Anything on the reconfiguration of proposals for St Paul's, I am not allowed to vote and I will be leaving the chamber. Thank you.
Conor Pampama.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Revenue budget, Appendix 2, 3.2.6. My husband works for Mid and West Wales Fire Authority. If there's any discussion on that, I will obviously leave at that point.
Conor Shelley Matthews. Conor Hazel Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Treasurer of Mentor Gorllewin Sir Gar, and I've been given dispensation to be present in the debate but not to vote if anything comes up. I'm also a member of the Management Committee of Newcastle Emlyn Swimming Pool.
Chair, item 4.1, again, page 28, blue badge holder.
Councillor Anthony Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Item 4.1, as Secretary of the Ammanford Miners Welfare Association, we have land leased to the authority. I've had dispensation to partake and vote in the debate. However, if it comes up specifically on car park charges, I will have to declare and leave the chamber.
Conor Edward Thomas.
Diolch, Chair. Blue badge holder hefyd.
Conor Sian Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. 4.1, I'm Chair of Mentor Gwendraeth. President of the NUT branch in Carmarthenshire. And there's an item dealing with aspects of that. Personal item, my mother works for the council, but I will not speak on the item.
Agenda item 4.1. My wife's a blue badge holder and I'm a member of RACHC, so regarding St Paul's, I do have dispensation to speak but not to vote.
Coryl Ken Howells.
Member of the Newcastle Emlyn Swimming Pool Management Committee.
My daughter works for social services and is a blue badge holder, so I won't be on item 28 to declare.
Colleague Joy Williams.
4.1, social care charging policy. My mother-in-law receives home care, and I'm also a trustee of Metilcombe Gwendraeth.
Thank you, Chair. It's declared that my husband's a poor badge holder.
Iawn? Reit, mynd i symud ymlaen.
Vice Chair, I declare an interest in the 3 members of the family work with the employed by the County Council.
Materion mor bellaf cadeirydd.
Chair's announcements. I've been down launching the Dylan Thomas mobile writing sheds. We're celebrating the 100th anniversary of his birth, and we should congratulate the school on their presentation of Vandermilk Wood, Dan Wenelt, years 5 and 6, and congratulations to them. Mrs Williams from Davern celebrating the 100th birthday. The Wales cross-country championships in Llandelo, and I've also heard that Mr Dewi Griffiths Llanfynydd was the winner of the men's cross-country race, and congratulations to him. And BASW, British Association of Social Workers, and there was members were commended in this chamber recently, and last evening I was in the Duke of Edinburgh Award this evening in Kiwi High. We'll move on to item 4, to consider the recommendations of the Executive Board in respect to the following items. 4.1, Revenue Budget Strategy 2014-15 to 2016-17. Are there any members who wish to declare an interest?
Again, Chairman, it's the reconfiguration of proposals for St Paul's. Specific discussion, I will leave the chamber. Thank you.
Iawn, gofynaf am gynnig at eilydd ddim.
Is there a proposal that we adopt the recommendation? If you switch on the light, if you will, Kevin, please. We do it formally if you...
Right, I ddim goler yno, ond
there was no light on, but the leader has proposed the motion. Is there a seconder? Councillor Edmonds? Councillor Devishon? Are there any questions on this? Councillor Edmonds is going to take us through it.
In a moment, I will certainly ask the Director of Resources to take members through some of the detailed proposals that is contained within the budget report for next year. However, before he commences, I would like to reflect on the broader economic climate within the country today, which will hopefully set the backdrop against which I and my colleagues on the Executive Board have arrived at the recommendations before you today. For a number of years, the authority has acknowledged the difficult funding scenario that it has faced and has recognised the need to do things differently and prioritise how it wishes to spend its increasingly scarce resources. The medium-term financial plan agreed by Council this time last year was certainly based on one of the toughest financial settlements seen, with ever-increasing commitments in certain service areas such as social care. However, the authority has always been able to set a balanced budget despite decreasing resources, whilst at the same time maintaining service standards to a large degree. However, what we are facing in the future is unprecedented cash reductions in the Welsh Government settlements, and whilst the focus on efficiency or cost reductions remains, it is recognised that a fundamental shift is required in relation to the quantum and nature of saving proposals over the medium term to ensure that financial sustainability can be achieved and a balanced budget is set. You will recall the spending review announcement in June last year confirmed that the UK Government is keeping to its planned spending reductions as the Chancellor continues to work to eliminating the structural deficit. and it seems that all evidence since implies a continued or even a greater squeeze on public finances and austerity becoming the norm. Whilst the spending review did not have a major impact on the 2014-15 figures, the basis Welsh Government allocates the budget did. And we learned that when the Welsh Government budget was announced that local government in Wales' position had changed significantly and had been hit by a far greater reduction than was previously in the indicative figures. The reductions announced for local government on an all-Wales basis was a decrease of 3.5% in cash funding, which is a real-time cut of some 5.8%, with further reductions coming in future years. For Carmarthenshire, our final reduction figure was calculated to be 4.4% in cash terms, and that was before considering any normal inflationary costs. Bearing in mind that Welsh Government funding accounts for approximately 80% of our net spend, and that each 1% thereof is equating to about £2.6 million, the impact of such a reduction on our spending plans is clear for all to see. To address this, and at the same time ensuring that council tax increases were as far as possible minimised, the authority has had to seek greater efficiencies in the way it delivers services, and unfortunately in some instances looked at the level of service provision itself. For the period 2009-10 to 2013-14, approximately £32 million of recurring expenditure has been stripped away from the Council's annual funding and spending. This is set to continue over the next 3 years, with a further reduction of £31 million identified. Needless to say, with a real-term cut in Welsh Government grant funding and significant pressures on our services, in particular within social care, the budget process has once again been a difficult one to ensure that the final proposals meet the authority's aspirations. As we moved forward along the medium-term plan, this process is likely to get even harder, and I feel some further difficult decisions await us not too far down the line. Local government finances are facing extremely challenging times, and the period of continued growth in the annual budget has come to an end. This being replaced by a period of continued reduced funding, contracting services, reduced staffing, and refocused service delivery options, which all adds to putting pressure on the local economy. This year's consultation process has again seen significant debate on the budget, and the Executive Board are grateful for the responses. I would first of all like to pay tribute to the 1,500 or so local residents who took part in one way or another in the recent budget consultation. Over 800 people took part in the online survey on the Council's website, while hundreds of others took part in other surveys, attended a series of roadshows, events throughout the county, or were involved in face-to-face consultation sessions. This is one of the biggest consultation exercises that this Council has ever undertaken, and I am really pleased with the response and would like to express my thanks to everyone who took part. One thing that pleased me and my fellow members of the Executive Board is that it was clear that local people taking part in the consultation appreciated that difficult choices will need to be made. It would have been easy for the public to say no to everything we were considering, but actually it is clear that they have considered the various options and given a balanced view. As a result of the consultation, the Executive Board have recommended the following changes to the initial proposals. I hope this will demonstrate that we are genuinely trying to do our best to listen to the local people and act accordingly. I only wish that we could respond positively to every single comment we have received and avoid making budget savings altogether. But the fact is that our budget from central government is reducing dramatically, and we need to find savings of around £31 million over the next 3 years. I now go on to the proposals. To withdraw proposal number 44 as listed in the consultation report, which was for the closure of one of the 2 respite centres for disabled children, which was planned to realise savings of around £200,000 per annum. As members know, it had been proposed to concentrate provision on this highly valued service on one of our 2 existing sites and to offer increased in-home respite support. However, the response to the consultation has been overwhelming, and we have received strong representation from parents and carers, and it is proposed that our 2 existing centres be retained. To withdraw next year's budget proposals 48 and 49 on remedial earthworks and flood defence and land drainage, so that we can have more detail in order to be reassured that this will not have a serious impact on potential flooding and associated problems. On proposal number 31, which reduced street cleansing budgets, we would like to reduce the savings proposed for the coming year by half of that what was originally proposed, so from £232,000 to £116,000. To withdraw proposal number 29, workplace parking for the time being. We have received numerous comments about this proposal as how and where it would be applied. As there is currently a lack of clarity as to which parking areas this would apply, Executive Board have decided that further research needs to be undertaken before this could be introduced. To withdraw the proposal 47, which was to remove the school crossing patrols and to endeavour to secure alternative funding from other sources, including sponsorship from private businesses. But we will also look at the risk assessment of the locations, and we will certainly give priority to the higher risk areas. Similarly, with proposal number 52, on withdrawing free pupil transport to denominational religious schools. Executive Board recommend that this be withdrawn and discussions take place with the schools to identify whether there is alternative ways to fund this provision. We also recommend that proposal number 22, free transport to school and colleges for the over 16s, is revisited and therefore propose that this proposal is withdrawn. We are all keen to encourage as many young people as possible to continue an education up to the age of 18, and therefore we will look again at this proposal and a further report be prepared after discussions with schools and colleges. That the outline proposals in respect of the youth services and libraries be retained. However, specific changes in these areas would not be agreed until a report outlining the full range of options and the impact of any changes being considered. With those changes, I would like to repeat my thanks to the public for responding so positively to the consultation, and also to the officers across the authority who have put in many hours of work in preparing the budget and running the consultation. However, despite our best endeavours to consult and respond, I am sure we will never please everyone. Some maintain we consulted too much, whilst others maintain it has not gone far enough. Throughout the consultation, there has been a great debate over the future provision of elderly care within the county. And when I come onto Capital, I will mention the ambitious programme of new provision for extra care within the county, which I am pleased to confirm includes a proposal for a new home within the Llanelli area, subject to the funds being made available from the cost reduction proposals. However, one area that has been of concern to myself is the early closure of one of the Ammanford residential homes before the Gwynfryn Extra scheme is completed. This early closure has been a concern raised in the consultation, but has always been a difficult one to resolve when balancing the cost reductions required against other priorities. I am pleased, however, to recommend to County Council today a solution. As a consequence of being recently furnished with the latest forecasted budget outturn position, which will be coming to the next Executive Board, the latest monitoring indicates that the overall forecasted position has moved from a £475,000 overspend to a potential underspend of £150,000, which means I can recommend to County Council today that we utilise this change in forecasted outturn to withdraw the early closure of the Ammanford home, which is budgeted to save £350,000, and to fund the £201,000 shortfall under recommendations from the balance at 1.3. This will allow the service pressure budget to be re-established at its original £2.5 million. I do hope members will be able to support me on this proposal. You will note that the report makes a further recommendation on pay. I am sure you remember the decision we took in April last year to apply a 1% pay award to all staff. That would be subsumed into any nationally agreed pay settlement for the 2013-14. The decision taken by the Executive Board last year was incredibly well received by staff and also by trade union colleagues, and without doubt this decision had a very positive effect on staff morale right across the board. The Executive Board have therefore proposed that we once again agree to the pay of increase of 1%, which is contained in the Council draft budget before you today, where applicable from the relevant settlement dates to staff. This increase would be consolidated, but not in addition to any national pay award. It would be subsumed into any national award. We have also considered the issue of pay for the lowest paid members of our staff. As a result, the Executive Board have proposed that Spinal Point 7 be removed from the pay model and that Spinal Point 8 is increased to £7 per hour with effect from the 1st of April, which represents to the Chancellor of the Exchequer's recent call for a rise in the minimum wage. If agreed, this would increase the rate of pay at the lower point of our pay model by 4.56%, and 3,042 posts on this establishment would benefit. And that again, I think, all members of this Council would support this proposal. Throughout the process, my colleagues and I in the Executive Board have had three clear objectives in mind. Firstly, to prepare the authorities for any reductions in funding that may lie ahead. Secondly, to ensure as far as possible that service levels and standards are maintained. And third, recognising that our citizens are also finding it hard in the current climate to minimise as far as is humanly possible any increase to our council tax. Unfortunately, these objectives are not mutually exclusive. A low tax increase next year does compound budgetary problems in the future, and conversely, a high tax increase, whilst assisting the future budget planning and maintaining services, would unduly penalise current council taxpayers. I believe the spending plans before members today achieve a fair balance between all the objectives. As I mentioned earlier, the authority requires cost reductions of £31 million over the next 3 years, 12 million of which needs to be delivered next year. This has presented us all with difficult decisions, and failure to deliver these savings will have a significant impact on the authority's budget during the year. Service pressures, both in the current year and forecast for next year, continue to cause concern in some services, the most significant being social care, as I already alluded to. Despite the severe pressures facing the authority as a whole, I am pleased to confirm, subject to your agreement to my proposal, mentioned earlier, that we have been able to set aside £2.5 million to prioritise and invest in these critical services. This sum will be held corporately and will be prioritised after critical examination of budget overspends. Agreeing a revenue budget and council tax for next year has been extremely challenging, and departments are going to have to make some difficult decisions during the year in order to stay within the resources allocated. The proposal to increase council tax by 4.77%, whilst higher than most of us would like to have seen, I am confident it will be similar to the majority of authorities in Wales, as we have all faced an extremely tough settlement. However, in achieving this, balances have been left at the lowest prudent level the Director of Resources can support, and we have assumed that substantial cost reductions will be delivered. These are just two of the risks contained in the strategy, and it is clear that departmental overspends of the magnitude seen previously cannot be supported in future, and I cannot stress that more. They cannot be supported in future. But I'm sure that the Director will have something to say on these issues a little later. I would like to turn to the Housing Revenue Account budget, where the delivery of the Carmarthenshire Home Standard continues to expand and build on the success story of previous years, and where we wait with an element of anticipation of the potential opportunity that will come with the Housing Revenue Account subsidy reform, which Welsh Government hope to implement by April 2015. Setting the house rents is always a difficult decision in balancing the impact on the tenants against the need to set the rent in line with Welsh Government guidance, and ensuring we can continue to produce a sustainable business plan which allows us to enhance the standard of our properties. As with last year, consideration has also had to be given to the changes taking place in respect of the Welfare Reform Act and the impact on both our tenants and the Housing Revenue Account. However, as an authority, we have an aspiration of continuing to improve the housing provision in Carmarthenshire, and it is important that we set the rent at a sustainable level. Therefore, Executive Board feel it necessary to continue to support our previous policy of setting the rent in line with Welsh Government guidance. I would therefore confirm the Executive Board proposals that the housing rent increase should be 3.95%, which I am pleased to confirm was unanimously supported by the Community Scrutiny Committee. This rent increase will allow us to continue to provide a sustainable business plan to the Welsh Government, and whilst it is higher than we would all desire, I'm sure, it does allow the authority to continue the great work that has been undertaking in improving our housing stock. This increase of 3.95% will mean in monetary terms an increase of £2.78 per dwelling per week, which again though is estimated to be more than £5 lower than the average housing association rental. The budget and housing stock business plan before you today reflect these proposals, and whilst I would reiterate that the plan remains very sensitive to the change in the assumptions, I am pleased to confirm that the housing plan still demonstrates that the Carmarthenshire Home Standard remains affordable and can be delivered by our target date of next year. I am sure this is an aspiration that all members and indeed all our tenants aspire to. Next year, we will see £28.6 million spent through the capital programme on our housing stock. This will include the continued upgrading of the kitchens, bathrooms, heating and electrical wiring, a substantial programme of painting and rendering, the continued upgrading of the non-traditional properties, future work on our environmental works project, and of course, the continued work of our new bungalow scheme. This business plan remains one of the authority's most substantial investments, with an estimated £230 million being invested in our housing stock, and it is very rewarding to receive positive feedback from our tenants, and the work completed on our properties is having a positive impact on their living standards, health and lifestyle. I am sure we all recognise the vital role that good quality, affordable housing plays in promoting sustainable communities and improving the health and well-being of our citizens. Finally, Chair, I would like to turn to the Executive Board's proposal on capital expenditure. Public sector capital projects have been, in some quarters, as a positive step in maintaining local jobs and stimulating the economy during a recession. However, over the last 4 years, since the austerity measures have been implemented, the general capital funding has reduced by some 34%, which obviously has a great impact on our capital programme. The Welsh Government general funding for next year has been set at £9.4 million, which means to deliver ambitions we must rely significantly on direct grants, capital receipts and reserves. Whilst having to restrict our capital programme as a consequence of the lack of funding, we have also had to consider the implications such expenditure has on the revenue budget, particularly during this time when public sector funding is so tight. It becomes a fine balancing act that every council continues to grapple with. How can we continue to stimulate the economy whilst not having significant resources to invest? The Board's proposals aim to optimise the opportunities, ensuring that we maximise the investment in Carmarthenshire by having capital funding available to match fund grant monies made available by Welsh Government and other external bodies. Over the next 5 years, the programme indicates a potential spend of £250 million, £117 million of which it is hoped will be met by external funding partners. These figures exclude spend under the Carmarthenshire Home Standard Programme. The programme continues to support private sector housing, ensuring that we maximise external funding for the renewable areas and funding demand for disabled facility grants, therefore addressing the very basic entitlement of our community, which is the right to decent housing. Carmarthen and Ammanford Extra Care Schemes are a key feature in our programme over the next 3 years, which are joint projects being delivered with Family Housing Association. You will also note that in response to concerns about the future provision of elderly care in Llanelli, we have been able to introduce a budget of £7 million in year 3 to enable us to review the Llanelli area provision. A full appraisal of options will be undertaken before any works commence. The funding to enable this project will be brought into the programme is made up of £2.5 million taken from reserves and a borrowing of £4.5 million, which will be funded from the revenue savings arising from the alternative use proposed for St Paul's. As in previous years, the school's infrastructure programme and regeneration projects continue to be key within our plans, with significant emphasis being placed in the medium term on identifying match funding for the new European Convergence programme. The MEP programme continues to be a key feature of the capital programme, with major schemes like Furnace and the de Nouveau project being completed over the next 2 years, and the 5-year 21st century programme of funding for schools getting underway, with major schemes taking place across the county. Some £86 million is planned to be spent on the 21st Century programme over the next 5 years. Thanks to Welsh Government, the Highways Improvement Programme continues into next year, but I must stress, unfortunately, it is the final year of a 3-year programme. However, this does allow a further £4 million to be spent on our highways infrastructure. And this is a great boost, which we would not otherwise be able to spend to sustain our infrastructure and to support a key priority area within this authority. We must accept, however, that the demand for capital resources will always outstrip the supply of funding. That is why the funding, such as the Outcome Agreement Grant, is so critical to support the capital programme. Inevitably, bringing together a sustainable capital programme, there will be winners and losers. However, I believe the planned capital programme for next year is affordable, prudent and sustainable. In closing, Chair, I would commend the hard work of the Chief Executive, the Director of Resources and all officers involved in the budget process. Their efforts, in my opinion, helping to sustain the Council's performance and delivery of services at a reasonable cost to the taxpayer. And I am pleased to support all of the budget proposals presented to members today, inclusive of my additional recommendation in respect of the delay in the closure of the Ammanford Care Home and the funding of the shortfall referred to in the original recommendation. Chair, I recommend this budget to Council for approval. I so move.
Iawn.
Just for sake of clarity, before we throw it open, given that I have this sheet in front of me, am I right to assume that you want this after the discussion as a package? Okay. So that I'm clear on that. Okay, the floor is open to questions.
Can't believe you've forgotten my name, Chair. I don't know how you'd like to take this discussion, but I think a lot of us have got several points, and I'm quite prepared to go through several points. Or would you like, for instance, to just go through the general budgets and take discussion on them one by one, or would you like the whole revenue budget at once?
Just to remind you that you've only 5 minutes, whatever you do.
Yeah, well, that's not an answer, Chair. So, I mean, seriously, do you want to do the budget by topic or just general views, and the directors can sort of make notes and come through at the end?
Start off with general views then.
Okay, right, okay. Well, as Councillor Edmonds has pointed out, the rationale behind all these cuts is to reduce the deficit by the UK government. Unfortunately, none of this, of course, is reducing the debt of the UK government, and so one wonders how hard we should try, because at the moment, financially, I think we are still heading for the cliff at some pace. But anyway, going through our own budget proposals, again, I think that we pointed out a lot of our problems. I think our consultation was good in itself, but since the topics for consultation were carefully controlled, I'm not entirely impressed that it was as free and interesting a consultation as could be had. I'll go first to my own scrutiny committee of social care and point out that this is very difficult, but one of the reasons that we continue to have a deficit is because although we have a deficit every year, we're not given any increased finance to cover that deficit. So although the Council is aware that we have a deficit every year, we aren't actually given increased funding for it to cover that deficit. And I think, therefore, the cuts are forced. And perhaps we should look at exactly how much each department is spending. For instance, the Housing Department tends to not have a deficit, and one wonders whether the juggling is actually done fairly. I'd like to say that we were all rather rather surprised to see that in the Llanelli Star that there was a £7 million investment in extra care in Llanelli. I think extra care, of course, isn't necessarily what it sounds like, in that it's actually, I think, less care for the frail elderly who can manage in their own apartment or house or bungalow, specially made, adapted, and generally is going to be provided by private sector firms, and therefore it's a nice way of privatising our care. Not, well, of course, that is our general policy as a council, is to privatise social care, but it's a nice way of doing it and making it sound like it's something special. I think that I'm very concerned that the closure of St Paul's, and I think we can speak that perhaps it's not actually going to be closed, I'm told by members of the Labour Party. We have a plan. Well, that plan should have been in what was presented to us in the Scrutiny Committee. That plan should not be suddenly dropped on us. But the closure, I understand, the £600,000 supposed savings are going to finance the loan for the £7 million extra care in Llanelli, and also suddenly £2.5 million from our reserves. Now, £2.5 million from our reserves could stop most of these cuts. So I think if we're going to build an extra care home, which will take some years to build, because the savings aren't going to come tomorrow, and if we're going to close St Paul's, but not really close it because something else is happening, so it's not going to be politically a closure of St Paul's, so nobody will be embarrassed who fought so hard to keep St Paul's open. I think I'd like that fully exchanged. I'm sure Mr McClellan can sort it out. And also, I understand Councillor Devichand has proposals for St Paul's, which I'd like to know whether they're firm and what they are. And I'd like them approved today. Otherwise, this closure of St Paul's, or not closure of St Paul's, is something we can't discuss because we don't know the facts. But to spend £7 million on a new build, when that's practically half the savings of this year, taking some from our reserves and borrowing more, I think we've got to discuss that as well. And borrowing is not a painless procedure. It's painless for us because, we've never seen £7 million and it sounds a good idea. But it is painful for the increased interest on our very large debt that we have here. And in fact, I think last year it was about 16 million in interest or something like that, Roger. But let's face it, if we weren't paying interest on all the loans that we've taken out in the past, we wouldn't have to make any cuts. And if the government the various governments had not said to councils, oh, we're not going to give you money for capital projects, you can borrow, maybe the entire country wouldn't be in such a mess. But to just carry on borrowing and carry on building as if it's a wonderful thing, but cut services, I think is an absolute travesty.
Could you please start winding up? Your time is up.
Yeah. I think the MEP, modernising education, which always has match funding, again, is a bit of a double-edged sword because, firstly, we know that a lot of our standards are falling in education, but surely if we actually disrupt people, merge schools, do things politically, and to get the funds, to get the grants, it's not very sensible. I think we should look more carefully at that. I note the 2.5 million to counter the overspend.
Well over your time,
okay, all right, 2.5 million to counter the overspend. 2.5 million for extra care home in Llanelli. Are those both from the reserves? And exactly what on earth are we doing? I think we are actually not helping the frail elderly. I presume that this will also lead to the closure of Kai Mine in the end, and I know that the leadership of this council has never been happy with the Llanelli councillors actually getting into a bit of a tiff and supporting their own people and voting to keep these homes open. And that's democracy. And the fact that they may have been run down...
Out of my democracy, if you to wind you up, please.
Okay.
I don't want to stand on my feet today again,
okay,
please.
30 seconds. The fact that they've been run down, the fact that we've been manipulated should not be forgotten. And I think if you vote for this budget, you vote to close those two homes.
Roger will come in on the financial bit first, and I'll come in then.
Could I say at the outset that the capital programme will come on the next item, so we'll certainly pick up some of those issues at that point. But a couple of points in terms of the revenue budget. Councillor Carrick, you mentioned no funding given to social care in the past. That's incorrect. We've always funded social care well above every other department. We've recognised the pressures. For the original strategy for next year, it did not recognise it, but what we've done is brought in £2.5 million into the budget strategy before you today, but not allocating it to a particular service. It's held centrally, so we can critically examine, but also challenge departments during the year, if they do predict an overspend, that they've looked at their own resources first, that they've done all they can to stay within budget before we allocate that £2.5 million. So one of your questions was where's the £2.5 million coming from? It's in the strategy and obviously impacts on the level of council tax presented to you today. You mentioned the housing budget possibly not showing the same reductions. Housing budget, per se, is not part of the council tax budget. It's a standalone housing revenue account, must live within and rely upon the rents that it's getting from its tenants to deliver the housing capital and its day-to-day renting costs. So it doesn't form part of the council tax proposals today. You also mentioned that we could use the reserves to stop the cuts. Yes, you can. But what are you going to do next year? You've spent your reserves. This is not a one-year fix. We need a 3 to 5 year solution, but it is within members' remit to decide to use the reserves. I would advise extreme caution on the level you use, because in 12 months or less than 12 months' time, you will be faced with the consequences of that decision in having to fund the following year's budget. But it is possible.
Colleague Jane Temlett.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted just to respond on Councillor Kayak's comments on the new extra care scheme in Llanelli, but seeing as that comes under the capital, would it be better to do that at that time? Yeah?
Wise.
Thank you.
Diolch, Mr Cadeirydd. Thank you, Chair. Every year the leader has been telling the Plaid Cymru group, why don't you present us with your ideas for the budget so that we can look at them in advance. Well, over the last 2 years we've done just that in this meeting. But unfortunately, disappointingly for us, no one has paid very much attention to our suggestions. So this year we began back in November as a group. We established a panel of experts within the group, and we've been working on the content of the budget, and in particular, if I may say, on the 52 services that will be cut, although they may be slightly less than that now. And Mr Roger Jones joined us in a meeting of the Liaison Committee to explain the situation and so on. We then conducted a detailed study, and we asked for a meeting with the Executive Board in order to be able to place before them our suggestions and ideas. But the Executive Board refused to meet us. In other words, they were willing to meet us if the officers were present. And so they refused to listen to our positive ideas, and that disappointed me rather, because they'd been asking every year for our contribution. And so we had no choice other than to send a summary of these options to the Executive Board on the budget, and we sent them to all members of the Executive Board. But unfortunately, we heard not a word back. Not a word. Nothing at all. No record anywhere that the Executive Board has discussed our ideas, nothing at all. Until we saw half a page in the Carmarthen Journal discussing our options with Mr Mark James's picture in the middle of the article. And I assume, therefore, that it was Mr Mark James who had answered and not the Executive Board, because we prepared a document on the budget and the response was made in the Carmarthen Journal. Now, that's hardly the way to operate as a council. Now, when these papers on the budget were sent out for this meeting, what it includes is the unison document. No cuts, budget proposals, the document is here, and we're very happy to see it. The unison document is therefore in with today's papers, but there is nothing here from the document that 28 hopefully responsible councillors who will be looking at the budget for next year, nothing on what they've produced, so another disappointment. But it saddens me to have to say that this reflects the attitude of the Executive Board towards the very strong group that we have. We try to help positively and constructively, and the response was nothing at all. And I have to say that I'm very disappointed in that regard. So forgive me. What we've done today is that the only way that we as a group can outline our ideas is by placing before you this morning a very brief summary of what we propose, because every other way that we've tried has been ignored or prevented, and I'm very sorry about that. So you will see the sheet that we've placed on the benches.
Shows you quite clearly that Plaid Group options for the 2014-15 budget. Now, we need 4.3 million to spare the 52 services under consideration for cuts. That's how much we need. So we are presenting you with alternative ways of releasing substantial sums of money so that we can maintain those services. That money, as we show you, is available. Now, it is a matter of priorities. But in view of the desperate financial situation and the dire effect these proposed cuts, long list of them, not mentioned by Mr. Edmonds, the cuts will have, and I appeal therefore to members to take please on board today what my group proposes. In other words, a quick summary of them here, and I will ask David Jenkins perhaps to refer to a few of these when I've finished. But please allow me therefore to propose an amendment. No,
say it in English and then in Welsh.
That this Council accepts the financial plan as presented to Council today to raise 4.3 million needed to avoid the cuts and keep the 52 listed services. So
the amendment is that this Council should accept the financial plan presented today to Council in order to raise the £4.3 million required to keep and retain the 52 listed services without being cut.
Propose.
Is there a seconder? Councillor David Jenkins to speak.
Yeah, diolch Cadeirydd. Obviously, I'd wished I'd have the same amount of time to respond as Mr. Edmonds had to present the budget, but obviously that is not possible. So, could we? Yeah, some meat onto the brief proposals we're putting forward there. There are, for example, in the employee severance scheme there, we are suggesting that a further 20 people be considered for early severance, which would increase the revenue or the savings by another £500,000. And in addition to that, within the within the finances, there's a job evaluation earmark reserve to assist with the cost of implementation of the severance scheme. And with each employee that goes, there's approximately £250 per employee less of a requirement against this particular reserve. So that consequently then would give us a further saving or a lesser demand on the reserve of something like £30,250. Perhaps a small figure you might say, but in the words of a leading supermarket, every little helps. Then, in terms of the CUM environmental, I've been keeping an eye on CUM for many years, as most people know, and the latest unaudited accounts of CUM, I think, give us a net profit there of another 200,000, which, according to my figures then, would give CUM an accumulated net profit for the period from 2009 to 2013 inclusive of something like £1.5 million. So again, there is money in the kitty, and I know the finance people will say that a lot of that money, cash in hand and bank, is allocated for the escrow account, which is to reconsolidate the landfill sites when they come to the end of their useful life. But in addition to what's said there in terms of announcing a dividend, I would also like the exec board and the officers to consider bringing in the recycling, the dry recycling element of cum in-house, or as I will later say, renegotiate the contract, because the figures I've had, and I'm grateful to officers within the finance department of providing the figures, that within the figures we pay cum a total of £6.259 million per annum to conduct the recycling business and the landfill business on our behalf. And if we take out the recycling, the recyclate side of that, we still end up paying £2.75 million for the recycling element of that. Now, in a WLGA report covering the 2011 financial year, Carmarthen's post-collection cost, that includes transfer, treatment and disposal, at £11.27 per household, was ranked 20th out of 22 authorities, with median cost at £2.51 per household, and the lowest cost, surprisingly, was a minus 4.83 cost, i.e. an income per household of 4.83 on this particular aspect. In the same report, mention is made of income per tonne from the sale of dry recyclate. That is the value of recycled product generated by the MRF operation. And as examples in the report, it says that Anglesey get £85 a tonne for the recyclate, Conwy £55 a tonne, Gwynedd £62 a tonne. And I picked these counties because they are representative of our sort of community, a mixture of urban and rural. And this then, and all these outperform Carmarthenshire, which gives an income of £0 per tonne. This raises a question as to what happens to the money generated by the sale of the recyclate. Does it go into cum coffers? Yes, I think it does. And if so, this is another form of payment from CCC to cum over and above the £2.745 million we're already paying them through our accounts. If we take the lowest figure of £55 a tonne, i.e. that's the Conwy figure, and apply that then to the recycling tonnages going through the MRF plant, this, based on the criteria, the recycled income, is theoretically something in the order of £643,000 again. Therefore, could not an investigation be carried out to establish a business case to either bring the dry waste recycling in-house, as has already been recently done by Swansea City Council, to, in their words, generate financial efficiencies, or alternatively, to favourably renegotiate the terms of the current cum contract due for renewal in 2015 to bring further year-to-year savings to the authority. Jeff, in his presentation, stressed the need to use the outcome agreement grant for capital projects. Well, the capital plan, we don't have to have a capital plan. We could stay as we are now. We like the county to grow, but we've got to allow it to grow in an affordable means. And some of the capital programmes are aspirational. They are not essential. And I think more capital projects should be money should be spent on projects that create employment, etc. Because that then would enhance the welfare of the county. So with that in mind, we've said that to use the outcome agreement grant in the short term, while the finances are the way they are, to support the revenue budget, and then possibly increase, because the authority has a property portfolio in excess of £1.4 billion, and again, although the property market is not ideally placed at present, it is gradually improving. And could we not increase our target of sales of portfolio property to help support the capital budget? Again, reserves. I state that if a forensic analysis was carried out on each item that makes up the authority's reserve, I am sure that a reduction across the board could be achieved when items such as underspend against budget, slippages and rescheduling of non-priority items are taken into account. An example, the Park Howard project in Llanelli, okay, for Llanelli people this might be an emotive subject, but I understand it's hit a bit of a brick wall and can't proceed at the moment. So why not reschedule that money and again come back to bring back Park Howard as and when these barriers have been removed? So, you know, there is money in the programme. And with those few comments, I will second Peter Hughes-Griffiths' proposals.
Diolch, Councillor Jenkins. Fi derbyn fyddig rhoi...
Thank you, Councillor Jenkins. I've given you a little more time, given that you're speaking on behalf of the group. I accept that. Roger, do you want to respond to that? Thank you, Chair.
I'm not going to comment on the merits or otherwise of the proposals being put forward, but I will speak on the financial viability of some of the proposals. Looking at the paper quickly, and I have seen this before, so it's not new to be fair, only 750,000 of the proposals put in front of us would be ongoing savings. The rest are one-off. So I would have to caution and then ask the question, what would you do in 12 months' time? So that's one comment. Cum is well known to me. We're always having this debate with Councillor Jenkins. Just to point out, we cannot demand a dividend. We are the 100% shareholders. We can imply we want the dividend, but we cannot demand it. That is down to the directors, and they have legal responsibilities. And before giving a dividend, they have got to look at their liabilities going forward, their liabilities to creditors, to the Inland Revenue, etc. They cannot give a dividend to an owner, i.e. us, to the detriment of other stakeholders in the company. That's the legal position. Also, in terms of the cash position, the figures that they've got is about £2.8 million worth of cash estimated at the moment. 1.5 million, as Councillor Jenkins mentioned, is in the escrow account. That escrow account cannot be touched. It's an account set up with the Environment Agency to ensure that there is enough funds available for restoration and post-closure restitution of the site in Antic House. In actual fact, that account is some £2.5 million short. And to cover that shortfall, they have taken out a bond with the bank, which costs them. One of the liabilities they would have to take into account before agreeing to any kind of dividend is, should they give us, the owner, a dividend and sacrifice potentially the risk of not being able to restore that site in years to come. So there is a shortfall. It's not that clear-cut, and I have pointed out previously as well that their cash balance, they've invested heavily in the facilities that helps us deliver on our strategy. In terms of the recyclate, whether it comes back in-house or otherwise, that's a fair question. It is something that we will have to look at. As Councillor Jenkins said, the contract is due up shortly, and we could look to see what's best for the taxpayers of this county going forward, bearing in mind that waste disposal these days is going more and more on a regional basis. But in terms of the income they currently collect and keep, that was part of the tender they put in. And I would contend that if we'd have asked for a tender whereby we kept the recyclate income, then the cost of treating that, they would have grossed it up. They are taking the risk that recyclate income stays at a certain level. If income from recyclate drops, Cum take that hit. If the recyclate income goes up, they make that profit. It's just the way the contract was set out. We can certainly sit down and try to negotiate that if that's what members wanted, but I'm not guaranteeing that it would be to the financial benefit of this authority. The reserves, yes, you can use reserves to fund the revenue budget. Again, I'd express caution. We're already next year bringing in about £1 million worth of non-recurring funding into the revenue budget, whether it's from the Icelandic banks. There's just over £500,000 from the output agreement grant. So there's already a risk, inherent risk within the budget strategy that I'm comfortable with. You could take more risks if you want, but then it is at the express loss to the capital programme. And I think Councillor Jenkins mentioned that there are some aspirational programme projects there. I'm not sure, without going through it again in detail, there are. Most of our capital programme is the schools programme. If members decide that that is no longer a priority, yes, let's look at the reserves. But that is an issue for members to decide upon. I'll stop there, Chair, but as I said, that's my financial advice, nothing to do with the merits or otherwise of the proposals.
Before we move on, I just want to make sure that everything that we do today is as it should be. I'll just bring in Mr. Dave Gilbert as far as the proposal.
I was dreading this moment, everybody. I've been reading the rule book and obviously I have to advise you to keep to the rules. Nonetheless, I think this is a constructive debate and I think everybody in the room wants a constructive debate because eventually you will go to a vote on it anyway. And what I would suggest, if every member is happy with this, is at the moment putting an amendment in a block as it is will have the effect of negating the original motion, and that actually will conflict with the standing orders. 14.6, I think, sub-paragraph 4. I know Sean Kayak is looking at me in slight bewilderment. What I might suggest is that if you, as you consider this alternative, you can suggest where you would drop something that's in the original motion and what you want to put in its place. I think what you will end up with then is an alternative motion that I think would actually stand within the standing orders, which will also allow the debate to continue, if that is acceptable to you all, because as it stands at the moment, the standing orders are fairly clear. You can leave out words, you can insert words and add others, and if we try and knit everything that you want to discuss into that, I think the original motion will just be totally lost. But if we could keep the debate on the basis that these are alternative suggestions, taking the point, I think, that you've got some alternative suggestions, where might they come in to the proposal, and then we can then go back to the original and we can maybe conclude the debate on that basis. Is that reasonably acceptable to everybody? Is that I want to keep the debate, but at the same time, clearly, just putting a block list of options in as an amendment does conflict, as I am being told, with the standing orders as they are, and I don't really want to conflict with those standing orders.
Just point for clarification, my understanding was the proposal was that the policy proposals, the 4.2 million that are left within the budget, be reinstated. In other words, we don't introduce the reductions or the cuts in budget, and that be funded from the proposals put forward in the paper. So the proposal is remove basically the 51 proposals and replace with these.
Everybody's happy that that is the alternative, okay?
Iawn. Gobeithio bod chi'n clear.
Hope you're clear. Councillor Madge.
Well, thank you, Chairman, and it's interesting, where we are again this year. And I hear the Plaid Cymru the proposal, and as our Treasurer has just said, it's again, last year your proposals didn't stack up, and they don't stack up again this year. I'm interested to see from David Jenkins about, because I challenged you in the media a few weeks ago, and it was in the South Wales Guardian, and one of your gurus, Roger Glynn, answered and said on your behalf, because I challenged you, because if you take capital schools out of the programme, which school wouldn't be going ahead? And he answered that. Why didn't you answer it? Not Roger Glynn, nothing to do with Roger Glynn, but you should have been answering it. And he's left the cat out of the bag now, because your proposals would mean reduction in some of these schools. And I think Chair, can I have I'm on the chair now.
Right,
yeah.
Please.
So I think that, when you start tampering with the capital programme, please, you need to say what projects don't go ahead. Now, I'm going to challenge Peter Hughes-Griffiths, because the independent leader, Pam Palmer, when you came to my office regarding having a meeting with the executive board, you asked to have a meeting without officers. I told you no, but I said that the officers could leave halfway through the meeting if you had anything to tell us. or you could have a political meeting with my friend Pam Palmer and myself. I don't know if that went back to your group, but I'm afraid the things that goes on in our office with yourself, you seem to say a totally different thing outside. So I'm going on public record now to say that's the proposal that I gave you. The proposal was that you could meet officers in the executive board, but you also could meet them, the officers could leave and we could discuss issues, or we could have had a political meeting with the three-party groups. Now that is a fact, and I've gone public record to say that, because the leader of the opposition is saying a totally different thing. And I got Pam Palmer as a witness to that, because that is a fact. As far as the seminar we had in the furnace, the opposition here didn't take any part in that. I think that was a well-organised event, and we did a lot of good work that day. And all the members who had turned up that day, I think, really had a lot out of it. And I wish that the opposition had taken active part. I also like to thank all the people who have made a contribution to the budget, and Jeff Edmonds has put that across well. It is important we had that consultation, and we had a lot of people came back from those consultations. And I'm proud from that. We have listened. And both groups, the independent group and ourselves, over recent months have been working on the budget. We've had numerous meetings, and we've got gurus in our ranks as well. And all the other things, I'm not going to repeat what Jeff Edmonds has said, but there's a lot of these issues that people brought to our attention. Now, I'm not saying that there is unpopular things in this budget, which there is. And, we've got the government of the day have decided to slash local government and cut back, not only in England, but in Wales and other parts of the United Kingdom. And we, as a council, is facing the same cuts that all other local authorities in Wales are doing at the moment. Swansea yesterday, 26 million. I would imagine the Pride-led or controlled Gwynedd will be doing the same, Ceredigion will be doing the same. So there's not one authority in Wales at the moment is not making the cuts. Sadly, we've got to do a balanced budget. And year on year with Plaid Cymru, bringing up about Cwm, bringing up, as the Treasurer said, but you get the same answers year on year, and you still don't listen. So I think this budget, as a famous word from Gordon Brown, a prudent budget, it is a prudent budget, it's a budget that can make a difference. But I'm also saying that there are things in the budget there's none of us on these benches or in this council want to do. I haven't come to this council all these years to do these kind of cuts. This is the 35th budget that I've been involved in my political career. This is the hardest and toughest. But we have done what we can, and I think the electorate of Carmarthenshire can look at this budget and see that we have listened and we can make a difference. Now, the capital programme is nearly 70 million. That creates jobs. It creates jobs in our communities, it creates jobs in apprenticeships, and it can really make a difference in the future. And as Jeff said, this group and the independent group show a vision for the future. And I'm listening to the Plaid Cymru group, then come up with one project that will look for the future. I'm sorry, but if you want to be the administration in this chamber in the future years, then you've got to have a vision. And the vision isn't there. Our vision is there. And we have made sure in recent years, I'm proud of the investment in our housing, and my cabinet member will say a few words on that in a minute. The investment in our housing, our investment in our schools, the investment in regeneration, and our officers, I will thank all our officers, the work that you've done on the budget in recent weeks and recent months, and I know that you put a lot of time and effort. I'd also like to thank the independent group for your support and the work that you've done as a group in working with us. This is the 10th anniversary of this administration and previous administrations, and we can be proud of that 10 years. We have delivered, and we will carry on delivering, and we will make a difference in the years to come. Thank you, Chairman.
Cynghorydd Elwyn Williams.
My original intention was only to speak on highways, but as Cwm has been raised, it's in my parish, and I did raise it in the last Environmental Committee. The first tip, the old district tip, is the responsibility of this council, not of Cwm. That has the big problems up there. So there's been a lot of scaremongering that we've got an ongoing liability. Well, that is in this council already. But that's all I'll say and come. I'll be politically incorrect for the next 5 minutes. I'm going to support spending on highways. It's the most important infrastructure that we have. Without a road network, we would not need schools or hospitals, as no one would be able to travel to them. We are told in the Environment Committee that we have a 7-year backlog of repairs, a backlog that started in the days of Dyfed and continues to this day. And what is our solution? Cut back even more, or on the repairs. It does not make any sense to me. I do not know what is growing fastest, the number and size of our potholes, or the cash reserves here in Council or in Combin and the House. If we continue with the cuts, we have to remember what Catherine said yesterday. Dyfed is coming back, and I fear he is right. By then, roads will close for months at a time, and some will not reopen at all. And all our cash reserves will become Dyfed's. It does not make any sense to give our cash reserves to Dyfed in 3 years' time. Use them to repair our roads today. No, get come to pay a dividend and take cash from reserves. I know they are for a rainy day, but it's been raining for the last 2 months as well. We need to keep our roads repaired and open, so children can go to schools, so our patients can go to hospitals, and so our economic activity can continue. That is what makes sense to me. Thank you.
Roger, sorry.
Yes, I won't go over the Cwm issue again, but on the reserves, if you look at the capital programme, and I do understand there's a difference of view on where there should be capital revenue, there is plans to spend 19 million of the reserves over the next 5 years. And I couldn't sit here and actually advise members, spend all your money just because we may become Dyfed. That would be financially imprudent and would be wrong of me professionally. I'm sorry.
Thank
you, Chair.
Raise, but before coming to that, I'd like to respond to what the leader said about the furnace event. It was, in fact, a complete farce, where 52 cut proposals were handed down by officers and meekly accepted by the Independent and Labour members present. He accuses Plaid of not having a vision. Well, the Executive Board don't have the wherewithal even to prepare their own proposals. They depend on officers, and we know currently where that is leading us. I want to speak about secondment for trade unions, please. According to Unison, the proposal to take away trade union secondment is an attack on the unions and their ability to represent and defend members' interests. Indeed, it flies in the face of Welsh Government promotion of partnership working as a model for industrial relations. Unison further claims that their representatives have encountered hostility and intimidation when requesting time off in the past, and if we remove the secondments, this is likely to increase. Now, I can understand some members in the independent group being prepared to indulge in a spot of union bashing, but it's truly sad, and I mean that, it's sad, that the Labour group, committed socialists amongst you, union members amongst you, are willing to go along with this. It's bad enough that this Council is prepared to implement a raft of cuts handed down by the condemned UK government via the government in Cardiff, cuts which may well include compulsory redundancies in a year or two, at a time when around 3,000 of our staff still earn less than the living wage. Even after implementing the £7 an hour, it will still be 65 pence less than the living wage. That's bad enough. But at a time like this, staff need trade union support more than ever. Cutting union secondment may cause added misery to some of our most vulnerable staff. After all, they can't afford to employ an expensive London QC. Cadeirydd, fel cyngor a chyflogwr cyfrifol.
Chair, as a responsible employer and as a council, do we not have a duty to do everything within our ability to ensure that staff are given every fair play, especially during difficult times such as these and in future years? An important element of this is to allow time off work for union representatives to deal with individual cases. And if we, as an employer, are not willing to provide reasonable time for this work, we could find ourselves facing legal challenges, and that again could cost us more than the money that we seek to save through this measure. I would now like to turn to one other thing briefly, which is the issue of parking. I'm genuinely concerned about this proposal to extend car park charges till 9 p.m. What we save is fairly small, £8,000 per year, but it will cause real concern and difficulty for many people. People who live in towns in particular, people who usually park their cars free of charge overnight will now have to pay. It will surely lead to people trying to park on the streets where people who currently live in the streets now park, and there is the potential there for conflict. People who come into towns, Carmarthen and Llanelli, to attend evening events would not be able to park on the street for more than half an hour until 9 p.m. That would affect people who attend meetings of all kinds, many of them voluntary workers, voluntary and charity workers.
Like so much else in this mean and nasty budget, will cause a lot of people a lot of aggravation. Diolch.
Diolch, Elin.
Thank you, Elin. Is there a response to that? Okay, we'll move on.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come in and discuss the St Paul's issue. Obviously, Councillor Kayak's lobbed a bit of a grenade into the room now because, in terms of the St Paul's, I understand we're not jettisoning the building. This is a reconfiguration of the services, and I hope that the reconfiguration is clearly going to be done with sensitivity, should it take place, but also that the building is going to be reconfigured to help early stage dementia patients, and I wonder if I could seek clarification on that, because dementia is a horrible disease. Currently 2 of my family suffer from it, and I don't think we'd wish it on anybody, quite frankly, at any stage. The debate for me has never been private against public. It's about providing the services, although I've always maintained that the council need to keep their hand in it, because you need to be in it to be part of best practice, in my view. But there are clearly some wonderful private care home providers that provide fantastic homes, and I've seen that firsthand, as well as in the public sector. So if I could just seek some assurances from the Director of Social Services on the reconfiguration, but also moving on to the extra care facilities, which I'm sure sounds great in terms of what may occur in Llanelli, but in terms of how that's going to be paid for, the 2.5 million from reserves and the 4.5 million in terms of borrowing, what timescales are we working to on that in terms of, from building the first bricks to completion, should the budget be approved in the way that you would need it to carry on? So if I could seek some assurances on that from the Director.
Director?
Yes, thank you for that. Some comments around, well, first of all, around the issue around privatisation, because I feel people are scaremongering around here. I appreciate the comments that the member said around the issues around the private sector, independent sector. There is high-quality provision out there, and we work with them. But just to remind members that the extra care schemes that we're currently developing, we have 2 in existence, 2 of which we've done in partnership with Qualia. They employ the staff. The 2 new schemes in Carmarthen and Ammanford, which are in partnership with Family Housing, the local authority will employ the staff. So that is not privatisation. The issue around the new development in Llanelli, throughout our programme of improving our residential care and developing extra care provision, we've said that Llanelli would be the next phase. We have 4 homes there that really do need to be, there's issues around the fabric, the condition of those buildings. We do have to replace them. Rather than having to do that as an urgent item, what has now been put into the capital programme is provision for replacement. Now, what the actual scheme will be, that is still work to be done. What is it? It is to review the provision, but that is something that officers are working on as part of our ongoing programme. In terms of St Paul's, And it was always one of the options. As members will know, St Paul's is linked to Waddles Court Shelter Complex. Waddles Court is within the Housing Revenue account and managed by Housing Services. We've had a technical appraisal which shows that St Paul's can be converted into flats alongside Waddles Court, and it gives us the potential to provide some more intensive care. It's a form of extra care that could be provided there, supporting the tenants in that. Now, the issue of around dementia care, the member's absolutely right. It is one of the biggest challenges that we face. The Executive Board member, Councillor Tremlett, has been chairing a board looking at how we develop dementia care within the county. Some of our extra care developments have actually got specific provision for dementia care, and within the new developments in Llanelli, both the reconfiguration of St Paul's and the new provision that is included within the capital programme, we will be looking at how we actually respond to the demands and the needs of people who require that particular support. So the detail, and in terms of the timescale, obviously we're going to come on to the capital programme, but the provision is made of year 3 of the programme, but within the next 12 months, the detail of what that will look like will be worked up and again brought back to members for consideration.
Councillor Gwyneth Thomas.
Councillor Gwyneth Thomas. Thank you, Chair. The leader said earlier that there have been numerous meetings regarding the budget, a number of meetings. What was the reason why they refused to meet the Plaid Cymru group? In other words, the largest group on this county council. And we could then have had a reasonable and careful discussion, because it is not in the Journal and the Guardian that we should have a reasonable and measured discussion. We are also accused of making cuts to the school's budget, the MEP. Now, that is not in our report at all. So that is misleading this morning. And they tell us that we have no vision. If they had been willing to meet the group, they could have heard our vision. We could have had a discussion on this. What I may ask is the vision of the Executive Board, the Labour Party and the Independents who run this council, other than cuts and more cuts, that will have a real impact on people throughout our county. And the only question I would like to ask, and answered if possible, is why can they include unison recommendations, 7 pages of them, in the papers that are before us this morning, without giving any consideration to the paper that was proposed by Plaid Cymru, so that could also have been in our bundles this morning? Why listen to the unions and not listen to the largest group in the County Council? Could we have a response to that, please? Thank you. Leader, do you wish to answer?
I've said earlier, when we offered meetings and the Leader of the Opposition didn't come back, and as far as that report, nobody had the question to put that in, so I didn't do that.
Well, that's not an answer, Chair. Unfortunately, that's the answer you've been given. But that's not an answer to the question.
Claimed that the consultation responses who got to the report are the responses to the formal consultation, and if there's an omission, then it is on my part, because I do not regard what I'd had from the Plaid Cymru as a formal response, because it came to me third hand. Everything else was a formal response. We met with the unions, they gave us a formal response. I did offer to meet with Plaid Cymru as a group. The offer wasn't taken up, I can't do anything about that. But I didn't have a formal response, and I'm sorry, that's the omission for not being put in there. I did meet, just to correct, with the opposition spokespersons. I did meet with the spokespersons.
Right.
Okay, we have 7 other speakers. 8, and that's it. 9, 10. I think you need to be aware that we have a motion proposed and seconded before us, so please be brief. Councillor Darren Price. Thank you, Chair. May I begin by saying that I understand fully that we need to make cuts, and I also understand that we're obviously dependent on the Welsh Government for our funding, and I accept that this process of deciding cuts is a difficult one for us all. There can be no doubt about that. but the least I would have expected is that politicians decide on these cuts based on their own principles. Historically, obviously, the Labour Party is a left-wing party, but over recent years in Carmarthenshire, we've seen more and more privatisation taking place of our services, and the potential that this should further expand. When we look at page 60 of Appendix 2A, that is before us today, in other words, the option that talks about the privatisation of home care for the elderly. Now, we've heard regularly from the Executive Board and also today from the Director that it's important that social services are provided by a variety of sources, including the private sector. But I don't agree with that 100%. A political decision has been made in Wales in the Assembly whereby it is the public sector that provides health services in Wales, and that decision was made because that service is vitally important to the population. Why then cannot we make a clear statement in Carmarthenshire, a similar statement with regard to social services? By allowing more and more services to go to the private sector in the short term, there is the concern that we will see problems developing in the long term, especially when we think of standards and our ability as a council to manage and provide these services. Now, I'm also concerned, and the Director referred to this in passing, I'm also concerned about the role of the market. Neither Director nor the Executive Board know at present how the local market will develop over coming years. And we could find ourselves in a position where the Council is wholly dependent on a very small number of companies to provide this statutory service. What then will be the impact on us as a Council when we're faced with some kind of monopoly or oligopoly operating locally, and the impact that would have on the price that the Council will face in the long term? It's fine to take short-term decisions, but we have to look on a wider basis, and so I would ask the administration to revisit this option and to not forget the historical standpoint of the Labour Party on the issue, and to reject more privatisation of the services. As we've said earlier, there are other options available, and I think that it's vitally important that we do look at those options in cutting our expenditure. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Hazel-Evans. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to reiterate what Darren Price has said already. Appendix 2.1, page 24 and 33. I'm not going to repeat everything I said last week, but I was very disappointed to read of the cuts on page 24. In the third year, what is most disappointing is that there has been no consultation at all locally with the users or staff. It may be that staff would have ideas as to finding other means of finding the same sum of money. It's a pity that the first thing that comes to mind is cutting services without looking at how that service can be made more popular to people and so on. In the recommendation on page 33, the costs that are referred to here, which are just over £500,000 under the leisure centre and the swimming pool, they will all be transferred to the schools. Now, we have several schools in the county who are not able to take on these costs because of their financial situation. What will happen? Will parents have to pay? Will there be consistency across the county? There will be many deprived areas in the county with disadvantaged families. Will that lead to some children being barred from using the service and keeping fit, and that will have an impact on their health?
Healthy, but I do not see how this can be achieved if we carry out these cuts. If the costs are unable to be absorbed by the schools, then they will have to be passed on to the families who are already under strain. When anyone is in economic difficulties, you slow down your expansion and try and deliver the services that you have more efficiently. What you're proposing here will eventually mean job losses and will have a detrimental effect on the economy. I ask you to support our recommendations so that we can maintain these services free of charge. By agreeing to the budget recommendations, you will be agreeing to the cuts which will affect every one of us, because we are all governors of schools, and it will also have a detrimental effect on families. Diolch.
Diolch. Cawlyd Emlyn Dôl.
Gallai ateb?
Iawn, Cawlyd Grafel.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr. Ar dudalen 24...
On page 24...
This doesn't come in until 2016-17. A lot of things might definitely change by that. I did speak at the last council meeting to the local member to say that there are many meetings going at the moment between the three counties, the Old Dyfed, to look at ways of increasing leisure in these areas. So we certainly hope that we can come up by the third year with some decisions about how we keep them open. But of course, you know, the old saying of is use it or lose it. Unfortunately, there are not very much use, apparently, to this particular pool. So what we're saying is we've got 2 years now in which to look forward, see how we can provide a better facility. The budget for leisure is £7.5 million. They have to find £1.7 million cuts within that budget. We agree swimming is very, very important. As far as the education side of it, the school budgets have been ring-fenced, so they haven't had, all the schools are getting the same funding, in fact getting a 1% increase, if I'm not mistaken. So what we were saying was we need to work with the schools to see whether from this extra funding that they will be receiving, whether they are prepared to help and support to keep the swimming pools open, because that is our aim, to keep leisure centres open, to keep swimming pools open, but we have to find alternative ways of doing so.
Cawlyd James Emlyn, Tybnol.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in response to Councillor Price's concerns on page 60, home care services for older people, I'd just like to say that no one values our care staff more than I do. Having been in post for the last 18 months, wherever I go, I talk to residents in care homes, their families, tenants who receive home care, and I can say hand on heart that they all praise the care they receive from our staff. We invest in our staff, we train them, and we want to retain them. And the phrase that's used on the paper is the proposal is to explore options for transfer or remaining in-house long-term domiciliary care to a local authority arm's-length trading company, a social enterprise operation, or the independent sector. It did not say it was just going to transfer to the independent sector. Personally, from my own personal point of view, I'm in favour of a mixed economy. I'm not in favour of 100% independent care provision, nor am I. It doesn't work to have 100% local authority provision. Given the demographics of our county, it is the most challenging to provide domiciliary home care in the most rural areas. So, as I said, the value I have on our staff is second to none. And as the Director's just mentioned, our plan is, when we build the new extra care homes, that we will in fact employ our own well-trained and delivering staff. Thank you.
Cawlyd Emlyn Dôl.
Thank you, Chair. I say this in English because there's a great deal I wish to quote in making the point.
Respond to much of what the leader said, but time doesn't allow that, although I'm constantly amazed at his propensity to misunderstand totally what's been said. And at least he spared us his usual speech on spatial awareness, where he tells us continually that we are where we are. Probably realise by now that we can't be anywhere else, really, but that by the way, I'd like you to, it's page 34 if you would, so we're on the same hymn sheet, so that you can see as well that I'm not making this up, because it is there in black and white. It's, as you'll see, the Home to School Transport Appeal Panel, which is one of the things that will fall if you pass this budget today.
It's a story from my own ward. Actually, if don't turn to it, but on page 6, as a preamble to this report, we're reminded about the basis on which we make equality impact assessments, and that's in order to ensure that what's being considered doesn't have a disproportionate effect on one or more groups. In this case, I'm speaking on behalf of the people I represent in Tumble, where it does. Because in Tumble, you can choose to walk 2 ways to my Gwendraeth school. You can go through Drefach and the Gorlas ward, or you can stay in my ward and you can go up through Top Tumble and then down. If you take either of those routes, you're just you're just over the 3 miles, which means that you get free transport. But of course, the officers have found out that there is another route. It takes you through the New Country Park, which is not lit. It's not a road. It's shrubland with a path that goes through it. But they found that if you walk that, it's 2.8 miles. And so they use that as an excuse to ask the people in Tumble, which is a deprived area, of course, that they then have to pay. So that's where a lot of these appeals have come from. Because they've been won because they've made the point that that is not a safe route to school. It might be 2.8 miles, but you wouldn't walk it yourself at 8 o'clock in the morning, let alone ask your children to do it. So that's one of the reasons there. But what I wanted to raise with you was, much has been made of a formal response and public consultation, like Kevin said, in Furness. Well, I was there. I sat around a table there, and you'll see the key themes from the public consultation. Those 4 bullet points were raised on the table I was sitting at. That the appeal panel should be retained, natural justice is needed, it's a small saving for a valuable facility, it shouldn't affect access towards language or religious schools. But as well as a recommendation, there's a recommendation on mitigation as well, you see, and fair play, that's been underlined, because what it says is, given the high level of allowed appeals, review the policy in consultation with interested parties. That's what's come out of your consultation, your public consultation, which you make so much of. It's there. And they've even given you a mitigation. Now go to the top of the page. And this is the executive board now. This is what comes out of that. Review home to school transport decisions. Well, I'll let you read it. What it says is, we're throwing the toys out of the pram. That's what it says. Because, look, there's 13 out of 18 appeals have been lost by us. That's costing us money, so let's get rid of the appeals. Let's not give the public a chance to make an appeal on what they consider to be an unfair policy. That's the mitigation that's given to you in your consultation that you make such a fuss about. But when people tell you something in a consultation, what you do is say, well, no, that's not the mitigation. What's wrong is that we're allowing people to appeal against the policy, so let's get rid of that appeal process. What you're doing is you're diluting the democratic process. That's what you're doing here. And there's no way around that. You can say what you like about public consultations, and you can say till you're blue in the face. If you vote for this one, you're diluting the public's act. One of the few places they have where they can access this council face to face, and you want to move it and say that they can't do it. And you probably ask me, the next question is, where do you get the money from? You vote for the amendment.
Colin Evans, Mateb.
I've ddweud, cadeirydd i fi'n cydfyn a beth mae Emlyn wedi gweud.
Thank you, Chair. I wouldn't disagree with what Emlyn has said. In fact, I spoke to Peter a while back, because when you look at the facts on this proposal,
you will see that over the last 3 months alone, out of the 18 appeals, 13 have been allowed. So what does that tell you, basically? It tells me, and I agree with him, that the policy is somewhat flawed. And that is why, Mr. Chairman, I have proposed, and as I said, I did speak to Peter on this issue. I'm sure he will confirm that. I've also spoken to John, who has raised that with me as well. And what I propose to do on this one, Chairman, is to set up an officer member, politically balanced, I would hasten to add, a working group to do precisely this and to review this policy.
because at the end of the day it's costing us 30,000 to set up this appeals panel, which obviously favours in the majority allowing these appeals. So my attitude is, what is the point? You're just throwing 30,000 away. The perception is that there is a problem with the policy. We will address that issue by setting up an officer-member working group, and hopefully, but I won't hold my breath on it, if a decision comes from this working group that we are setting up, and they decide on a policy which they think is fair and equitable, perhaps then there will be no need to have an appeals panel, because everybody will be adhering to a policy which has been democratically arrived at, and hopefully everybody can sign up to. So those are my comments on that, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Just briefly, Kevin. Just quickly. Yeah, I'm grateful for the comments, but I stand to what I said. After 1 p.m., it's gone. Okay, given that you've pointed to 1 p.m., I'm aware that we have at least another 10 speakers. We have a proposal and an amendment on the table, and have had for an hour and a half. So we'll move on, but please be as brief as you can. Glennog Davis. Thank you, Chair.
Which Jeff said earlier, we do our best to listen to local people. That is what he said during his presentation. We do our best to listen to local people. Well, diolch yn bod ni wedi gwrando.
Well, I'm glad that we listened to the concerns of the Amman Valley and the town of Ammanford, and that there has been a change of mind on the home in Ammanford. In other words, the closure has been postponed, not removed, for a year. And the proposal will, I'm sure, come again before us in future, but we're grateful for the postponement.
Listen to local people.
To what extent do we actually listen? I'm aware that this decision has been made, in other words, to charge higher fees on the sports clubs who hire pitches and so on from us as an authority. Well, we as councillors need to read our local papers. Many have referred to local papers this morning. Read the South Wales Guardian this morning. That's all it contains, the complaints about us as a council. We are making enemies day by day, ordinary people who take their children to these sports fields to promote sports activity. It's the death knell to several clubs. They do their very best to give children, young people, the opportunity. And remember, we're dependent on the third sector, these volunteers who provide their services free of charge to teach sports to our children and young people. What will they do? They won't be able to afford to pay these charges. It's a huge blow. I was listening to Radio Cymru this week, and they had an hour's debate from people from the Tumble. You could have the same debate up in the Amman Valley. It relates to cricket, soccer, rugby, across the spectrum. This resource is vitally important to our communities. We claim, or we say, that we have people who suffer from obesity and other health-related issues. We encourage people to take part in sporting activities, and what do? We close the door tightly in their faces. May I ask you, as an executive board, to reconsider this highly injurious measure that you threaten upon our children and young people?
The people, let's rethink this decision. It is against the wishes of the people. We are making enemies in our communities with this plan. And
I urge upon you as an executive board to reconsider this silly policy. Councillor Colin Evans in response.
I may remind the members of the reasoning behind the realignment, and that's what it is, realignment of the sporting charges. And just to refresh the memories of some of the members who may have conveniently forgotten about this particular issue. We have 14 bowling greens, we have 43 rugby and football pitches, and we have 6 cricket pitches. Now, the current cost of maintaining these are £341,451. The income, the paltry income that we derive from these is £77,447, and the shortfall is £264,005. Now, as I've said before in this chamber, Chairman, we have maintained these facilities to a gold standard, no question about that, compared to other authorities. And I'm quite proud of the fact that I'm saying that. But for the 59 clubs that receive, in effect, a subsidy of £264,000, one which is a non-statutory function, we have 70 clubs in Carmarthenshire who do not receive any form of subsidy and maintain their own play areas. And that is a fact that is conveniently forgotten, I'm afraid. Yeah. This is anything but a level playing field, if you excuse the pun. It is unfair, and it is an unsustainable situation, particularly when viewed against the cuts in my department, which is some £10 million over the next 3 years, and that's out of a £35 million budget. The fees for 14-15 have been set and have been set for some time. And as an example, the junior football and rugby rises from £9 to £13.50. These fees, and this is the other point, Chairman, are still below the Welsh average. The fees for 15-16 and 16-17 are indicative only, and will be the subject, and this is something else that's been conveniently forgotten, will be the subject of review at the end of 14-15. Now, these fees should also be viewed in the context of the asset transfer programme, and I'm not going to go into the minutiae of the asset transfer programme. That is out there. You've all had information packs which have been sent to each and every member here, plus the town councils, plus the sporting organisations. Again, Chairman, to put this into context, this is about fairness. This is not about making a profit, but all about recovering our costs, so as to be hopefully cost neutral in year 3. Mr. Chairman, I now have to prioritise service delivery, with statutory functions, obviously, statutory functions taking a priority. Now, thanks to this unprecedented rainfall, the worst in some 250 years, I have seen more potholes on the A40 and the A48 than I've seen, well, in the last 4 weeks than I've seen in the last 4 years, as the road surfaces begin to break down. My annual highway maintenance budget, Chairman, is £10 million. This is going to be cut by £3.2 million over the next 3 years. Now, it costs on average just over £100 to repair one pothole. This, Chairman, is the reality of the situation. This is why a statutory function such as highway maintenance has to take priority, and has been mentioned before by the councillor in the back. It has to take priority over non-statutory functions such as the maintenance of play areas. But again, I will emphasise the fact, Chairman, this is all about fairness. Thank you.
Councillor Jeff Owens.
Thank you, Chair. Again, to reiterate what Glennog said, listening to the people. A lot has been spoken about St Paul's, which is in my ward. So as the elected member for Tishire, I must protest on the behalf of the residents to the proposed closure of St Paul's as an old age people's home. As Bruce McLernan and Councillor Jane Tremlett are aware from recent meetings at the St Paul's with the staff and family, and from the previous campaign in 2010, there are strong feelings in my ward against the proposed closures of St Paul's. The proposal closure of St Paul's on economic grounds has been engineered by taking out the less financially beneficial beds out of other homes in the area and putting them all into St Paul's, thereby creating a greater cost per head in the beds. I have no objection to this policy on principle, but what I think it is wrong is using this policy as a means of closure of St Paul's on a financial basis, when it's been engineered to start with. In a ward which has had antisocial facilities anointed and other wards dumped on it, to compound this now by this pretending closure of St Paul's, which is the only facility in my ward which the people want and are happy is there. All of a sudden, a new 70-bed new facility has found itself on the 5-year programme, but with no financial been identified other than that linked to the closure of St Paul's? If a new 70-bed facility has been identified as being necessary, how can you now propose closure of St Paul's before it has been built? And if the proposed seaside school is anything to go by, this facility will not be built within the next 10 years. I thereby oppose the closure of St Paul's as an old age facility, and the new facilities are up and running. And if this is NIMBYism, then in a ward it is already, as I right to do it, is my ward, and that's Tisha Ward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I fully understand the concerns and those expressed by the local member. And we keep talking about closure, but what we're really putting forward is a re-provision, and a much-needed re-provision. A lot of members, obviously the local members, but a lot of members will have been to see St Paul's, but many members may not be aware. It is not a standalone residential care home in the way that Togvan or Glenmarlais, pardon me, or Argyll have been. It is very much a part of the supported living in Waddles Court. Physically, it's all part of the same, with a central area in the middle for a garden area for people to join. And the re-provision that we are suggesting is much needed in the area. And I'm very fond of a song by my favourite actor, Kevin Spacey, and one of the lines is, "Damned if what you're feeling isn't change." And we're all resistant to change, and I do understand that. But I honestly believe that if we can make this re-provision in St Paul's, it is a needed re-provision for those people who will be able to move in there. And also, pardon me, with the proposal for the extra care scheme in Llanelli, it is very early days, but I championed it from the beginning because I strongly feel that we are building the new Argyll in Carmarthen. We are just about in March to go on site in Ammanford. And for me, in this role, I couldn't sleep, quite frankly, if I felt that we were just ignoring Llanelli. And Councillor Kayak's made comment earlier on Llanelli councillors and issues there. But for my part, I'm inclusive by nature, and I disregard political persuasions. As far as I'm concerned, we're all here to do the best for our communities, and I accept your concerns, but I stand by that we will in fact be improving the service for people in Llanelli by re-providing in St Paul's. Thank you.
Commissioner Richards.
Mr Chair, I merely wish to comment now. It's been discussed. Councillor Dole and Councillor Colin Evans have replied on it. It's the question of the Appeals Committee. Having been a member of the Appeals Committee for the last 10 years and the chairman for the last 8 years, constantly, that's all we've asked for, is a review of policy. We appear as a human face, believe it or not, of the County Council when people appear in front of us, but equally so, we need to change the policy. I'm delighted if it's going to happen, it needs to happen, but the Appeals Committee isn't only dealing with schools transport, we also deal with human resources as well, and that adds a bit of interest as well to the work that we're doing. Thank you.
Commissioner Tegwyn Davison.
I know Sean previously mentioned me, and I know that others have mentioned St Paul's. Sorry. Sorry, Sean. Sean Kayak. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. The thing is that when we do listen to people, and we were concerned about what you were saying is the closure of St Paul's, but it isn't closure. What it is, St Paul's isn't fit for purpose. Now, last time I voted to keep it in. That was before my mother went into a home where basically the facilities there were halfway down the hall. Where she was blind, she couldn't see what she was actually sitting on. So that brought home a point. The people should be treated with dignity, should be treated with respect, and should have facilities for their own purpose. If HRA and if Bruce and Robin will let me explain, and Jane, what we were hoping to do there is basically put 10 purpose-built ensuite flats there for intermediate care. Now, that isn't sending it out to the private sector, that is keeping it in-house, where we want to keep things, where you have said you wanted to keep things. And that is why this proposal had to go. I was hoping it would go through the right channels, because I wanted you all involved in the appropriate scrutiny committees. But being it's come out this way, I'm more than happy to talk to it and propose it, because I feel this is one way of giving a facility that's fit for purpose, that we're listening to the public out there and is much needed in our society, and that is intermediate care. Diolch yn fawr I chi.
All right, Kevin Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of general points to begin with, and then one specifically on the budget. I welcome, as do the Plaid Group in general, the recommendations that have been withdrawn from the original plan. We're very glad that they have now been reconsidered, and one we've heard of this morning, the Gwynfryn Care Home in Ammanford, is something that we welcome very much indeed. I accept also that the leader, in attacking the alternative proposals prepared by Plaid Cymru in order to score political points, that's part of the arena in which we operate during this kind of event. But I'm sure that quietly in his heart and in the minds of others, he and others would have to accept that there are good points that were made in the alternative proposals that would have prevented many of these savage cuts that are being placed before us this morning. If I may note, before I come to the one specific point, it was very disappointing to me to see the attack a few weeks ago in the Carmarthenshire Journal on the Plaid Cymru proposals, not by the leader of the council, but by our chief executive. There are alternative proposals that have been placed before us by unison, but I have not seen the chief executive attacking those in the same way that he attacked the Plaid recommendations. And I always think that it's a very dangerous thing for any chief executive to step into the political arena, and they do so at their peril, as we may perhaps have seen recently. I would have welcomed if the leader of this council had put his picture and his name next to those attacks. That's what we would have expected. If I may finish, you can come back.
Campbell has made.
Name the point of order, sir.
Name the point of order. He's named the chief executive on that article. It was nothing to do with the chief executive. It was the Carmarthenshire Journal who made that story. It wasn't the chief executive, and I put that record straight.
Right, now, well,
until he told us we weren't to know that. Okay, carry on, Kevin. I'm sorry, Chair. I didn't say that the chief executive had written it. What I said was that his name and his photograph was appended to the story, and there was no quote, not a single quote from the leader. So that's the point I'm making. So there is a theme here running through all of this. But let us come to the point that I wish to make. May I ask, and given that this matter has been raised, may I now ask for a response, and I'll come back to the point. Who wrote the article that did appear in the Carmarthenshire Journal with the chief executive's picture next to it? May I ask the leader who wrote that? Do you want to respond, Kevin?
Journal put that out there, you know, and that's.
Right.
Carry on, Kevin. Forget that. The article is here. Read the article, and you can see clearly that you have nothing at all in this. It is only the chief executive that is quoted. But may I come to the point that I wanted to make, namely the issue of cutting £60,000 from the Welsh language budget. We know, as a council, that Carmarthenshire has lost 6,000 Welsh speakers over the last 10 years, which is some 6% of our population. And for the first time in our history, there are fewer than 50% of the people of Carmarthenshire able to speak Welsh. And you agreed to establish a working party, a cross-party working party, and there are members of this working party. We've all worked very well together, and we will shortly be publishing our report to the Executive Board next month. I'm disappointed that this cut is made now, before the working party has had the opportunity to write the report in full and to place its recommendations before the Executive Board. I know that some have concern about the Mentra Iaith, and the Mentra Iaith are named here, and some may suggest that they haven't focused, as they should have done in Carmarthenshire, on plans to promote the language. Now, the Working Party has dealt with that. We have looked at that, and there are recommendations on that very issue. But may I finish by saying this? I don't like to see in any recommendation the fact that the cost of the translation service is set against the Welsh language. Look around the chamber this morning at the people who use translation equipment. They're not Welsh speakers. Welsh speakers can speak and understand both Welsh and English, and this council operates a policy that treats the Welsh and English languages on the basis of equality. And so any translation from Welsh to English or from English to Welsh is expenditure in both languages, not expenditure specifically with regard to the Welsh language. So may I ask that we should never again see translation being set against the Welsh language. It is no more expenditure on the Welsh language than it is on the English language. So I would ask you kindly to take that out, and to take out the cut of the £60,000 cut, because I think it's only right that you should see the Working Party report before making a decision on any possible cuts in the Welsh language. Because what message, Chair, does that send to people out there when we've seen the largest reduction in our history in terms of the numbers of Welsh speakers, and here we are cutting the expenditure on the Welsh language? And what message, and I will finish with this, Chair, S4C is considering relocating to Carmarthen or to Carnarvon. That's the competition. It's between ourselves and Carnarvon. What message does it send to S4C? There is a public meeting this very evening in the Halliwell Centre to try to encourage S4C to come. What message does it send to them that we as a council don't take the Welsh language seriously? Thank you, Chair. Councillor Allen, speak.
Diolch yn fawr, Chair. I refer to the budget consultation 2014-17 regarding, and then page 6, CCTV cameras in the towns of Carmarthen, Llanelli and Ammanford, a reduction of £30,000 a year. I also refer to the Environment Security Committee, Public Protection Committee of the 14th of November, report by Chris Burns and Andrew Kenyon. The continuing use of CCTV cameras is and has been made the county a much safer place. Through proactivity, provided evidence of crimes being committed throughout the whole of the county. The use of CCTV cameras, substantial evidence that they are value for money, evidence that can be attributed to the arrest of 215 people, which is a 50% increase on the previous year. So I think that this is absolutely essential that we keep this £30,000 in this budget. Some people may say, well, where does that come from? Well, with total expenditure of roughly in the region of £500 million, one has to think, well, there must be some money there somewhere for these essential services to help the police to catch repeated criminals, long-term criminals in the main, not all of them, mind, and they're all alleged criminals, of course, when we have this information. But they do provide
absolutely essential and specific evidence for courts, then we can reduce, hopefully, the crime figures again and further on into the years in the future, particularly drugs and A-class drugs, which is an absolute nightmare at the moment in the three major towns, which many people in high office, not the leadership, etc., tend to try to kick under the carpet on occasions. It's no problem, but it is a huge problem. Could I also finalise, Chair, if possible, very, very briefly? I'm very concerned indeed of the possible privatisation of home care and care homes. My own mother only passed away a month or so ago, and that was a terrible, upsetting thing for the family. We all go through it. Unfortunately, we are over it by quite a lot now, by quite a bit. But the staff and the care that she received was absolutely wonderful, absolutely first class. I do not want to see that deteriorate by privatisation if possible. Talk about.
I think the second part has been dealt with. Gareth Jones, Councillor Gareth Jones. Thank you, Chair. Questioning the increase in school meals charges, I'll quote from the minutes of the Education Scrutiny Committee, December the 19th, 2013, in English.
Primary school meals by inflation plus 5%, plus 5 pence to £2.20 in 2014 was challenged with the current price of £2.
In other words, we all agreed that it would far higher than
whilst the group accountant noted that the approved increase in 2013-14 to £2.10 had not been implemented, which further complicated the issue.
In other words, it wasn't clear what the original price was, and it still isn't clear to me what was the original price from the outset. So I'd be happy to have an explanation of that. Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you, Chair. The current price, the original price in the context of the question, is £2. That should have been increased a year ago, but that did not happen. So the reference to inflation and 5p on top of it went back to the £2. So that was the narrative. The suggestion is to increase that will bring the price in the primary sector in Carmarthenshire back in line with the rest of Wales. We've gone from being amongst the most expensive in previous years to now being one of the cheapest in Carmarthenshire, and so the suggestion is that we should correct that and match the rest of Wales. It's also important to remember that this authority subsidises the school meal services in the primary sector to the tune of £1.5 million a year, so that parents don't have to meet the true cost of providing meals for their children in our schools. Councillor Ken Howells. Thank you, Chair.
To a comment made by Councillor Meryl Gravel when she replied to what Councillor Hazel Evans had mentioned about Newcastle Emlyn Leisure Centre swimming pool. And you said that it is not being used. That is incorrect. That is not true. And you made a sweeping statement by saying that it is not being used. Then you brought in a quotation, use it or lose it. You're quite fond of quotations. Not long ago, you said you pay peanuts and you get monkeys. Mr. Cadeirydd, a question I have.
Chair, another question I have is page 34. And this isn't clear because it says Home to School Transport Appeal Panel.
It's a committee. There is a panel which consists of members of officers rather than members. And people are allowed to appeal against the decision of that panel. So I welcome Councillor Colin Evans' remarks about looking at the policy again. But I'm not holding my breath, because this is the only committee that I know of that is ruled by common sense. There is no party or anything, influence or anything. And I look at the figures differently to you. I see that 13 have been allowed. They've been allowed because the original decision was not a fair one. And they came before us and we allowed it. So you shouldn't say that that is detrimental. I would also like to refer you to page 49, where it mentions that the public transport support, which reduces the bus subsidies, is regrettable, particularly in rural areas. And I live in a rural area, and people are dependent upon the bus service, not only to go to hospitals and to towns for shopping, but also to work. And reducing this will isolate those communities even further and make it even more difficult. Is it a grand policy of this Council is to force, or the Executive Board, is it a policy is to force people to move into towns like Carmarthen or Llanelli? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, okay, we have 3 more speakers, and you can come back on that, Colin. But I think we've already had the answer. But we have 3 other speakers, and I will then put the motion before you. I think we've all had the opportunity to make our views known, and there's a danger that we'll start repeating ourselves. So, Colin, you can answer back quickly then on that.
On the
last point, I don't want to repeat what I said the first time with regard to appeals panel, but with regard to the public transport subsidy and so on, what we are going to do is to reduce it by 100,000.
Remind members that I did bring a report through to, first of all, scrutiny, and it went through Council on the last November's meeting, on the whole issue of bus subsidies. You did, in fact, approve the regional network strategy, and as part of that regional network strategy, there was a prioritisation matrix which you approved at that meeting. And as I spoke to Hazel earlier, part of that prioritisation matrix dealt with transport to the rural areas, and that's why I'm possibly using whatever influence I have. Well, it's finishing on the 1st of April anyway, the switch committee. I wanted to make sure that nobody in the rural areas, or certainly Carmarthenshire, which is predominantly, as we all know, a rural area, would be disadvantaged by the adoption of the regional network strategy. And that's why that was included into the strategy, which has since gone to the Minister for approval. So I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Cymwyrydd Mawr Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure that I wish to speak on the Welsh language as you would wish me to do. I'm very proud that a working party has been established. Although I've been in those discussions, I'm glad that I have been. I can't say exactly what has taken place, because the working party has kindly asked me if I won't do anything before the report is produced and submitted, and I'm happy to accord with that. And so I'm sure that you will all be glad to see how the cross-party working party has worked to ensure that the recommendations are ones that hopefully we can all agree. I do know that you're all concerned about the future of the Welsh language. We must remember, of course, that an element of the £40,000 has been part of issues that we've been working on with the Mentra Iaith. That is almost half of the global sum, and I'm sure that we are currently on the 3rd year of that, and we have now come to the point, and I'm sure that this working party will do more to promote the way that the Mentrau work, and will hopefully work with us on that. I also know that mention was made of the way in which we talked about the Welsh language and the translation unit. It must be said that the translation unit obviously deals with Welsh language matters, and unfortunately what they do is to translate from Welsh to English. It's actually the other way around. But in written form, most of it is from English to Welsh, and we all have to bear that in mind. And you will recall last year we said that we earmarked funding for the Welsh language, and some of that is still available, and we will look to how we can use that more effectively. Thank you, and I hope that that clarifies matters. Councillor Callum Higgins. Okay, one less. Councillor Anthony Jones.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Fi'n credu, os mae rhywun...
I think that if anyone asks why I wear these, it's for two reasons. One, I'm hard of hearing, and two, and depending on who I talk to, in fact there's such a difference in the Welsh language that I speak village Welsh, and I enjoy speaking village Welsh, but it must also be said that if I go into educational schools, unfortunately I have to revert to English. That perhaps is something for me in the future to address, but I am where I am.
Firstly, Chairman, and yn ffodus mynd nôl I Saesneg, if I could firstly, Chairman, think of the amount of budgets, as the leader mentioned earlier on, that have gone through this county council. And I think for those of us that have been here over some time, and those that possibly are looking at this from outside, previous councillors, I think we can all agree this is the worst settlement that any local government association has had to face. And let's put the blame where it solely lies. The UK government, the condemned government, which has reduced the amount of money that is brought down to the Welsh Government, which in turn is given to us as local authorities to distribute in the best way we possibly can. And there have been eloquent comments, and yes, they are savage cuts. There is no doubt about it. But how do we as a local authority take that forward in a most sympathetic way in keeping as many services as we possibly can within the public sector? And we must remember we commission services on behalf of our residents as well. And we have our own constituents working in the private sector, and we have a lot of residents working in the public sector. Always remember they are our residents. So I think that's a very important aspect for us to realise. By choice, we should be the leading voice in setting standards, and I fully agree with that. That, to me, should be where many should try to follow, no matter what walk of life you are from. We must continue to use the best use of our resources, and I think if you look back over the last 10 years, I think it's fair to say we haven't done a very bad job compared to what other local authorities have gone through in Wales. Carmarthenshire, with the leadership and the direction of excellent officers, has certainly hit above its weight. And that is recognised throughout Wales. The investment, the jobs, the apprenticeships, it all comes down to prudence and the direction of travel that we need to go. And I appreciate the work that Plaid Cymru have done on their budget. And I think it is done with sincerity. I fully appreciate that element of it as well. But it has also been suggested that you've had meetings with the Director of Resources, albeit your spokespeople. We choose a different route. We have the whole group there, so we all know what the officers tell us. That's a decision for yourselves. But I'm sure that the officers would have, as they always do, professionally give you their opinion when it comes to financial matters and what the proposals would mean. And I think the Director of Resources has explained to you again about the cum element, and it really isn't something possibly we need to keep revisiting, but it should be reviewed. Now, that will happen as a matter of course. And it's all right then to reflect on using our resources and reserves. Yes, but you could use it this year. But if you take that into revenue, and you've used your reserves this year, where do you get the money from next year? Because that and the revenue is an ongoing commitment. Which is why we have continued and we've maintained the stance that when it comes to the outcome agreement grant, I think it is called in this day and age, it has been the performance incentive grant in past times, and I don't know what other name it may resurrect itself in future times, who knows. But the reality of that grant is we must earn it. It is not given to us as a matter of course because we are Carmarthenshire County Council. We must hit targets. And whilst we have been very successful in achieving those targets in the past, it doesn't mean we will achieve them in the future. So again, I think it is wise, and I think the advice we've received is good advice. We use it for one-off capital expenditure and again to draw down money. So to summarise the position and what I could see from the Plaid Cymru proposal, it seems to consolidate our position, and I think that will lead to stagnation of Carmarthenshire. Because you want to use reserves, you just want to stop capital just in case it may not happen. And I'm sorry, that to me is not the right approach. I think that this administration has had the vision, has got the vision, and will continue to have the vision to give the best we can for the people of Carmarthenshire. So when it comes down to having aspirational projects, or in certain circles they call our wish lists, if many members may reflect on that terminology. They may be wish lists, they are aspirational, and that's what we tell officers to do. Bring us the projects, have them on the shelf, so that when there's money available, we tap into it on behalf of our people of Carmarthenshire. And we have been successful on more than one occasion in doing that as well.
Start winding up, Councillor Jones.
I shall certainly, Chairman, start winding up. So if I could again refer back to the Plaid Cymru budget proposal in front of us, I cannot obviously support the amendment because we've already, through the word of the Executive Board member, looked at the care homes situation in Ammanford, be it Carmarthenshire and or Tegvan, and should any member support this, quite clearly it would negate that. Now, how on earth do I square that with the people of Ammanford and Carmarthenshire and Tegvan? And it's normally said the recorded vote is always appreciated. I'm not going to call for one, but it may be well worth reminding ourselves of the direction of travel we are going. So, can I finally say, Chairman, I shall be opposing the amendment by the Plaid Cymru Group, and I will be supporting the budget proposals from the administration, and I would urge everyone to do the same. Diolch, Cadeirydd.
Okay.
On the basis, the Plaid Cymru Group has been misrepresented in the last contribution. Just to make it clear, the budget savings put forward by this group would negate the necessity for any cutbacks in the 52 proposals. So the suggestion by Councillor Jones that for us not to support the Labour amendment would go against, the care home situation in Amford is simply wrong, and I think it's important that's noted before any vote is taken, recorded or otherwise.
I think that we've had a lengthy enough debate. I think we're ready to go. Peter, we're going to place the amendment first. May I place the amendment before the meeting? And I'll repeat it.
That this Council accepts the financial plan as presented to Council today, the one that you have in front of you, to raise the 4.3 million needed to avoid the cuts and keep the 52 listed services. That's the amendment, and if that is passed, I envisage then that the rest of the budget can be supported. We're doing both, as it were. I take it that will be another vote, of course. But the amendment, if agreed and if passed, will free us then to support what's rest of the budget in the next vote.
Okay, we're ready to go to a vote. Everyone happy? Everyone in favour of the amendment, please show. Everyone against? Please keep your comments to yourselves, all of you, please. Any abstentions? One.
Now, we've taken the vote. No, I'm not accepting it, sorry. We've taken now. Are you abstaining or what? Against, okay, right. I've tried, Councillor Devisham, I tried not to get up, and when you speak to the chair, you stand up. Now, I don't want to stand up, right?
I'm standing up because I'm asked. Councillor Devisham made a proposal saying that in St Paul's the 10 beds would be converted to purpose-built.
With all due respect,
is that proposal real or is it a wish list? Can I ask for information through the chair?
Please sit down. You've had this opportunity before we took the vote, and I'm not taking any discussion. The vote has gone. We'll have the result of the vote now, please.
It's 23 for the amendment and 43 against.
Yeah, we may straight to the
Okay, go straight to the vote. Everyone in favour of the budget recommendations as placed before you?
The committee itself.
Everyone please show.
Sefwch i ni gael counto. Ryan erbyn.
Against. Any abstentions?
That's 41 for, Chair, and 23 against. No abstention.
Okay, the budget is carried. We'll move on. Before we go any further, I have to acknowledge we're very grateful to councillors. It's been a lengthy debate. People feel very strongly about various issues, but I'm very grateful to you for the way that you've behaved this morning, so thank you for that. And I hope that continues to the end of the meeting. 4.2, 5-year capital programme, Council Fund, 2014-15 to 2018-19. Are there any members who wish to declare an interest? Opposed, move, seconded. We have a proposal that we accept the report. Everyone in favour? Please listen. 4.2, I made it quite clear to you. Anyone against? Abstentions? Okay, we'll move on. 4.3, housing revenue account budget and housing rent setting for 2014-15. Are there any members who wish to declare an interest? Proposed, seconded. Councillor Shankayach.
Just ask that if there is an amount in the housing revenue budget that we're approving today for St Paul's.
Well, with all due respect, that's nothing to do with the matter before us.
Right, okay.
Chair, I'd like to call in perhaps Bruce or one of them to say whether or not. I don't want to say it this time because I don't think I'm in the position to say, so I don't know, Bruce, if you would like to come forward. We are proposing it. It will be there, but I have got the full financial report in front of me.
That's better. There is flexibility within the business plan for us to bring forward the St Paul's. It was always an option because St Paul's is linked to Waddles Court. It was always an option that we would extend it, and within the overall business plan there is a facility there to bring forward that work, and it is not a wish list.
Yeah. Okay. I'll ask members to show whether they're in favour of receiving the report and accepting the report. Anyone against? One against. Any abstentions? One abstention. Move on to 4.4. Treasury Management Policy and Strategy 2014-15. Are there any members who wish to declare an interest? It's proposed to recommend the Executive Board recommendation with regard to the adoption of a Treasury Management Policy and Strategy for the Council for the period 2014-15. Is there a proposer and seconder for its adoption? Proposed, seconded. Everyone happy? Everyone in favour, please show. Anyone against? Any abstentions? One abstention. Move on to item 5. To consider the recommendations of the Executive Board in respect to the following items. 5.1, the Carmarthenshire Home Standard Plus, delivering what matters. Are there any members who wish to declare an interest?
Just to come in on it, if I may.
Looking for an old age bank, Sorry, I pulled it back. I did really want to lighten up the meeting a bit, sorry. Right, Yswyn, Abyddiant.
Any declarations of interest?
If I could, please. I don't know if I can stand mine at my age. Chairman, the Carmarthenshire Home Standards Press, delivering what matters. I am delighted to introduce our plan for supporting tenants and residents by improving their existing homes and also by delivering new homes. As we clearly highlighted in the presentation at full council last week, The Carmarthenshire Home Standards has achieved a great deal. We have already completed over 70% of the original programme, which forecast initially on improvements that would reduce the fuel bills, and this was requested by our tenants. I am pleased to say that we are on target to complete the works by 2015. We all know that the delivery of the home standard is not just improving and modernising tenants' homes. It was vitally important that we got the most out of the £2 million investment. As a result, we have been able to demonstrate an improvement in the health, economic, social and environmental prospects for the individuals and their communities. Examples of these have been, believe it or not, less visits to their GPs, increased training and employment, and overall residents feeling safer in their communities. I would like to acknowledge, however, that progress has been achieved by working together, tenants, prospective tenants, local members, partners and staff across Carmarthenshire. I also recognise that we cannot stand still or stand alone. The CHC Plus plan presented today reflects people's future and aspirations. How will we go about meeting their needs? There are many changes happening nationally which will impact on our plans, such as the potential local government reorganisation, the new housing bill, changes to the housing finance system, and of course the welfare reforms. We need to prepare for these changes and meet the challenges. The CHC plan that you have before you sets out the next steps on our journey and how we will further maintain and improve our homes, improve our service and focus on what matters to tenants, meeting housing needs through building new council homes and purchasing existing ones in the private sector. As everyone knows, we will be facing difficult and challenging times in the years ahead, and it is important that we spend our money wisely. The CHS Plus is a real opportunity to continue to improve people's health and their well-being. We must ensure that we do not miss this opportunity and chance. I would ask members to support our vision of CHC Plus and the financial and delivery programme over the next 3 years. Diolch yn fawr I chi. Thank you.
Given that we've had
I want to make a quick comment on this. I've got to say I welcome the plan enormously. I know we disagree on a lot of issues when it comes to policy, but I do have to say that on this particular one, in terms of the Carmarthenshire Home Standard, this is a success story for the Council. I commend the Council for the decision that was taken years ago to retain their council housing stock in-house. It hasn't happened elsewhere. That's to be commended. The financial investment is significant, and certainly I've seen benefits in my own particular ward, and I'm sure that's across the board within the county. The point I want to make, I suppose, is that this is a wonderful example of what we as a county and what as a public sector can achieve when we put our minds to it, linking back to the social services comment earlier. So I commend you for the work and look forward to seeing developments. Diolch.
Good. Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Anthony Jones.
Well, again, Chairman, can I echo the sentiments of the previous councillor on this Housing Plus as we are taking this excellent policy forward. And I'm looking across the chamber at the head of housing that I need to remind him of the issue of options in these new houses that we will build hopefully in a very near future. Options on heating for our tenants. And I did say in the last meeting that I would continue to bring this up, and I shall maintain that stance at every opportunity until someone will finally listen to what I would deem common sense. But I think an important aspect of taking this forward, and possibly a serious question for you, a lot of our properties in Carmarthenshire are getting, I use the phrase, cold called for insulation, wall cavity insulation. Now, I've come across it, and maybe other members have come across it, where unfortunately that has not been the success it is portrayed to be. And then many people find themselves in dire straits, not knowing what to do. Having dampness and having condensation even makes it worse. And that's certainly not the fault of this policy, I can guarantee that. But I'm looking for assurances that how do we explain to people what they can do in such circumstances, because it is still a problem out in our council estates, be it our own properties or those that have been purchased years ago.
I'm sure the point is made. Ask members are happy to show whether in support of the motion. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Unanimous, thank you for that. We'll move on to 5.2. KI Mynydd Mawr Special Area of Conservation, preparation of supplementary planning guidance. Are there any members who wish to get an interest? Don't go too quick, Councillor Madge. It is proposed to adopt the recommendation of the Executive Board to formally adopt the draft KI Mynydd Mawr Special Area of Conservation SPG document as supplementary planning guidance to the Carmarthenshire Unitary Development Plan. I'm sure that there must be an easier way of saying that, but anyway, it's been proposed and seconded. Councillor Dore, wish to speak? Thank you, Chair. If I may, as the local member, one of the local members.
The draft report came before us in October of last year. I chose to speak against the funding choice in the proposal. And at that stage, I pointed out that we alone, out of the councils who have set up these areas, and there's some to the south, and there's some to the north, were the only ones who were safeguarding our colourful little friend by, well, I said, by shooting ourselves in the foot, because as you see from what's been proposed, it's through choosing to mitigate against it by asking for contribution from developers, whoever they might be. The other councils have done it by grant funding and taking that route. I think we're not only alone, but unique in being the only ones who choose to penalise financially our own people in order to save the butterfly. The people I represent in the Cross Hands ward will all have to find an extra £1,500 if they want to buy a house there, because you penalise the developer, but of course he's going to pass that on to the buyer. We all know that, and it's us they'll be picking up that bill. And the irony of the decision may not have may have escaped you, but if I can just point it out, when we discussed, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, the strategic direction of the emerging LDP, we as an opposition did our very best to persuade you that the principle of supporting regeneration should be equally distributed across the county. We asked for a recorded vote on that, and it was recorded, but you chose to ignore that and to identify three strategic areas for regeneration. One of those was the Cross Hands area. And yet, what we seem to be saying to anybody who might want to come along and build a factory in Cross Hands, on land that we've prepared especially for them, is that we're going to penalise you, by the way, because you're living next door to this butterfly. So we'll sting you with a payment for a butterfly friend. I'm just wondering what sort of, how that hits people who we're trying to invite in to regenerate, that as we're doing with one hand and taking away with another. And it's even proposed in this paper as a positive move, as something that's sustainable. Well, we're also told that we can't do this through grant funding. We can only look at the educational elements of this through grant funding. But can I quote to you Isabel Macho, our biodiversity manager, who put this up on our website exactly a fortnight ago, where she says CCC, that's us, has successfully secured funding through the REF, that's the Residual Ecosystems Fund, for 6 commons in central Carmarthenshire, that's wet bogland. Now, if we can get the grant funding for that, why then is it not applicable in this case? Because that's not for education, that's for the sustaining of those boglands, which is important, but it's been done through grant funding. When we received this initial draft report, it's not in this one, we were told that there's already £300,000 in the kitty for the butterfly. That's already in there, apart from what we're going to gain again. But that one of the reasons we're doing this is in order to support a post which will ensure compliance and sustainability. Well, I'd suggest that with that amount of money in the fund already, that we're on a pretty safe wicket already before we start. And if I can just make a final point, we haven't got fenner, and this is, if you were to look up in the Conservation of Habitats and Species Regulation 2010, which is what we're complying with this policy, under point 130, it does say the appropriate authority may cause a local inquiry to be held. Well, in terms of consultation, that's what I'm suggesting, that's what we should have done, because this is something that most people, if you ask people in my ward, do they realise the hit that they're taking on this, they'd say no. But I would have argued that a public inquiry would be the very least we could have done, if we're going to put that sort of cost on everybody who's developing in that area. But we weren't given that choice. The consultation took a different route. I didn't respond to that consultation because I made my response in the initial one in October, but I'll make it again. And I'd remind people that there's another species in the Crosshands area. They're called Homo sapiens. They're the people I represent. And Homo sapiens, for those who don't know in Latin, means wise man. Well, I don't think we're very wise if we're telling our people that we've got 300,000 in the fund already, but we're going to penalise them more for this butterfly that chooses to live amongst us, at the same time as we're telling them that we're reducing the leisure facilities for their species.
Before I ask Mr Ian Bowen to come in, unless I can see the clock almost at 1 p.m, may I propose that we suspend standing orders just to complete the 2 remaining items? I don't want us to be accused of rushing through things, given that the next item has already been discussed, most of it. So, are we all happy to suspend standing orders, just to complete the remaining matters? Mr Ian Bowen, do you want to come in?
First of all, can I perhaps remind members for the requirement for this document is to ensure that any planning decision is made within the law. And on top of that list of law and legislation we have to comply with is European legislation. The situation in Crosshands has developed over a number of years. The natural habitat was there before the decision was made to focus industrial and economic investment. So we have to find a vehicle in which both can proceed within the legislation. This document provides that process map, if you like, to ensure that compliance. It also provides clarity for those wishing to develop. Clarity in as much they know exactly what they need to set aside in relation to a contribution to meet this legislative compliance in terms of developing within the area identified in the plan. That has to be set aside against other Section 106 contributions, so there is an element of negotiation there. We have to comply with the 3 tests, if you like, of applying Section 106 agreement, so that check and balance is there. You made reference to other projects, and yes, we have been successful in a number of habitats and in relation to a number of species in attracting funding. However, every funding mechanism has to have match funding, and that's been a subject of some discussion this morning. Through this mechanism, that match funding is already there.
It would allow the project to bid for European funding in terms of the new convergence, post-convergence proposals are coming forward. So that match funding is already in place. And it would also allow us to submit bids to the new £6 million project announced by Welsh Government Assembly last year. So we need that match funding for whatever projects we are successful in getting the initial grant for. So in answer to your query, really, or to your concern, it is a legislative requirement that we do take into account the habitat of the marsh fritillary butterfly. There are a number of special area conservations designated through the European habitat process, and this is a mechanism to provide that clarity. The difficulty when you talk about individual applicants at the moment, they're not sure because they have to submit ecological study to support their application. This is a process that would negate that requirement. So an individual putting an application in wouldn't have to put that kind of habitat survey in because this mechanism is in place. It's been done on an area basis so we know exactly where potential habitat is, where the existing habitat is as well. So that also it would be a saving for those putting in individual applications. They would not have to go through that process of getting that ecological information. So yes, it is a matter of checks and balances, but we do believe that this mechanism provides certainty and clarity for those wishing to invest and developing in the Crosslands area and securing compliance with European legislation. Legal challenges is an increasing trend, and in fact European legislation is the most common factor on basing any legal challenge, and by adopting this method we feel that we are protecting the authority in arriving at decisions on individual planning applications.
Conrad Anthony Jones.
Yeah, diolch Cadeirydd. I think again, whenever issues of SPG or supplementary planning guidance comes before us, I think sometimes people misunderstood or misunderstand the principle of what it's about. I mean, supplementary planning guidance for Carmarthenshire County Council, as the head of planning has just mentioned, is there to safeguard our area, our people, so we can put conditions there, and should it be challenged, at least the planning inspectorate can see that it had been considered formally, guidance had been put in as a supplement to our planning policies in Carmarthenshire. So I think we must all recognise that we should welcome supplementary planning guidance, and we have many guidance forms issued, obviously from Welsh Government, be it on TANs, technical advice notes. This is one where we feel it appropriate in Carmarthenshire to safeguard our residents, as the head of planning has just actually taken forward. So I've got no hesitation in formally moving we accept the 3 recommendations as listed in our papers, Chair.
Councillor Shankaya.
Just a quick one. I'm sure you've all got the responses to the consultation, and I think the important responses are, of course, from Natural Resources Wales, so that we keep in with the habitats regulations. And response 9 suggests that we recommend the Council seek a legal opinion on the proposed prioritisation of provisions. There may be conflicts with other requirements, habitat regulations, so on. Now, we've actually responded to say, no, we don't need that. You know, the supplementary planning guidance is enough. Now, I suggest that for once we actually take a legal opinion before the event, and so we actually prevent a problem of having legal challenge. Because if we have an environmental law opinion at the start, I think it would be watertight, rather than leave this loophole in that we haven't taken Natural Resources Wales advice on getting a legal opinion with our guidance. Thank you.
Just very quickly on 2 points. I disagree with Uncle on 2 things this morning. I'll do both at the same time. He said earlier about the original cause of our problems here, financial. I'm no supporter of the Tory government in London, but I would respectfully remind Anthony that the message that was left on the desk for the incoming minister was the cupboard is bare, just in passing. The other one is I've got no argument here with the SPG. My argument was in regard to the funding. Nothing to do with the guidance, the funding.
Do you want to come back on that?
As you would expect me to do after being rebutted in public by my fellow councillor.
You should be quoting the order. Right?
I shall certainly quote it, Chairman. It's 14.4, personal explanation regarding a debate we had some moments ago. That said and done, I fully do appreciate Councillor Emlyn Dole's point that he does not support the local government in the UK, the Conservative government. Can I thank him for confirming that? Maybe some people weren't sure, but clearly, from a personal perspective, I would certainly oppose what they are saying. And maybe the fact that there was no money left, as you quite rightly and quickly pointed out, maybe that the bankers took it. And maybe the government put money into the banks to safeguard all our money and savings so that the people in the countries weren't bitten.
Right, okay.
As a point of clarification, Chair, I thought that would have been important.
Right. We won't move into that. Ivan Bowen, please.
Yeah, a clarification on this issue of prioritisation. Clearly, we are moving forward with the local development plan, which has been mentioned this morning. The examination into that plan is currently underway. One of the tests of soundness of the plan is deliverability. And obviously, in terms of investment from an economic perspective, it's how that economic investment balances with the natural habitat, which has European legislation. So that, if you like, is at the top priority. And this is what's emerging in developing the community infrastructure levy as well. So that is the top priority. The other requirements, such as highway improvements, has been alluded to as well.
With all due respect, please, if you're addressing, address to the Chair. Thank you.
So clearly, the priority in terms of the list would be European legislation. Other improvements that would be required to deliver the development would be part of that negotiation in terms of finalising the Section 106. So in terms of priority, clearly what NRW have indicated is, well, how is that explained? We feel it is explained in the supplementary planning guidance, and we have taken a legal opinion on the relevance of this particular approach when we come to introducing, if the Council decide to go down that route, of introducing a community infrastructure levy. So we feel that the matter has been addressed through the process.
Okay, thank you for that. Could I please ask members to show whether they're in favour of receiving the report? Anyone against? A couple against. Any abstentions? Okay, we'll move on to item 6, to receive the report of the meeting of the Executive Board held on the 3rd of February 2014. Are there any members who wish to take an interest? Okay, given that we've discussed most of this in the last 2 hours, I ask members to show whether they're in favour of supporting the motion.
It's to Roger. I was there at the Executive Board, and Roger, at that meeting, you suggested that the capital programme was 1 year soft, 4 years hard. 1 year hard, 4 years soft. Could you explain what that's about?
Yes, it's what we do every year when we approve a medium-term plan, whether it's revenue or capital. You agree the first year, so the scheme set out in year 1, i.e. 14-15, will commence, but schemes that are due to commence in years 2, 3, 4 or 5 in terms of capital will not commence until we've monitored the first year, because we may be losing funding, costs may have gone up, or the scheme will not be required. So by soft, what I mean is departments or officers do not now go ahead and commit themselves 2, 3 years down the line.
Okay, you've asked for a vote. Everyone to show, please, that you accept the report. Anyone against? Abstentions? Move on to item 7, appointment of Vice Chair of the Appeals Committee. Council is being requested to appoint a Vice Chair of the Appeals Committee following the resignation of Councillor Callum Higgins as a member of that committee. All I can tell you is what is before me, sir. Councillor Louvain Roberts has been proposed as Vice Chair. Sorry, you said that's the point I was raising earlier. She's gone. Or it's gone, hasn't it, surely? Oh, part of it is left. Okay, right. It's been proposed that Councillor Louvain Roberts be nominated as Vice Chair of part of it. It's been seconded. Please show in the usual manner. Anyone against? Any abstentions? There are no other items on the agenda, and I have not been made aware prior to the commencement of the meeting of any items that require urgent consideration, and I therefore declare the meeting closed. But before concluding matters, may I thank you all. I knew that today wouldn't be easy for any of us, particularly if you're sitting in the chair, but I am very grateful for the way in which we've all behaved. Thank you.